The world is inside out. Imagine for a moment that everything you know is not out there, but in here. Your world is not an empty stage upon which you stand. Instead, it is folded inward toward your mind, as if the universe is cradled within your perception. What feels like objective reality is a projection, a grand tapestry woven by your senses and stitched together by your thoughts. In this inside-out world, the boundaries between you and everything else dissolve. The world exists within your awareness, and each breath you take reshapes its contours. Philosophers from Immanuel Kant to George Berkeley have argued that reality is inseparable from the observer. Kant proposed that space and time are forms of human intuition, ways our mind organizes raw sensory input. Berkeley went further, claiming that objects only exist insofar as they are perceived. Modern neuroscience echoes these insights. Your brain receives electrical impulses from your senses, constructs a three-dimensional simulation, and updates it continuously. You never perceive the world directly. You experience a neural construct crafted by billions of cells working in concert. Consider sensory deprivation. In total isolation, with no external stimuli, people begin to hallucinate. Deprived of incoming data, the brain fills gaps with internal imagery, visions of faces, places, and narratives that feel undeniably real yet exist solely within your mind. These ghostly landscapes reveal perception's malleability. If absence summons phantoms, what of the input we assume we receive? How much of our waking life is shaped by the brain's impulse to fill in blanks and anticipate events? Modern virtual reality dramatizes this inside-out model. Strap on a headset, and within seconds your senses yield to a digital realm. Your eyes believe alien landscapes, your ears detect phantom raindrops. Every detail is code rendered by your brain as genuine experience. The outer world vanishes, yet the inner world feels complete. VR makes visible what the mind does constantly, constructing entire realities from streams of sensory data and interpretation. Physics offers its own metaphors for this inversion. Gravitational lensing shows massive objects bending the path of light, warping our view of distant galaxies. Space itself curves, wrapping around matter. These cosmic contortions mirror our perception's distortions. The universe is not a flat canvas, but a pliable medium, and what we see is always filtered through spacetime's curvature. Likewise, our mind bends reality inward, shaping a private cosmos within each self. Even in everyday life, subtle illusions remind us that the world is once removed. A desert mirage convinces you that water shimmers ahead, though none exists. A fleeting flash of light makes you see shapes in clouds that vanish when you blink. Perspective tricks in art and architecture exploit the brain's assumptions, transforming flat surfaces into soaring arches. Perception relies on unconscious rules of thumb, weaving a coherent scene from fragmentary clues. Imagine touching a table. You feel pressure, texture, solidity, but these sensations are patterns of neuronal firings, maps of signals coursing through your nervous system. The table itself lives in your perceptual space, not outside it. You are both sculptor and sculpture, dreamer and dream. Objects exist only in their appearance, in the interplay of light, form, and neural processing. This perspective reshapes our cosmic role. Instead of distant stargazers peering at an objective expanse, we become living universes, each containing its own reality. Every moment of perception births an entire world. The boundaries between self and world collapse in a singular event of awareness. We are never mere observers. We are inside participants, molding existence with each thought, feeling, and heartbeat. Embracing the inside-out universe invites wonder and responsibility. If perception shapes reality, then by changing how we perceive, we change the world we inhabit. Mindfulness, art, and science become tools to reconfigure our inner cosmos. By recognizing the creative power of our minds, we can spin new worlds, heal distortions, and transcend limiting patterns. The universe within holds infinite possibilities, awaiting exploration. So, next time you look around, pause and ask yourself, am I seeing what is out there? Or is the world reflecting something deep within me? What contours of perception are bending the universe inward? As you contemplate this inversion, remember that the greatest frontier lies not in distant galaxies, but in the boundless landscapes of your own mind. Reality is skin deep. Scratch your fingertip against the surface of a calm pond, and the mirror of reality ripples into unrecognizable patterns, revealing that what we perceive is but a thin film stretched taut over deeper currents. Reality is skin deep, so fragile that beneath its smooth veneer lies a shifting underworld of perspective, memory, and interpretation. When you've held a story in your mind for years, the narrative feels as solid as stone, but prod it with a single question, and the walls crumble like sandcastles in a rising tide. Consider the way a child's memory of a family vacation warps over time. The laughter around a campfire once burned bright in your mind, vivid as a sunset, until you dig deeper and discover that half the details are borrowed from photographs or other people's recollections. You reach for the feeling again and find echoes rather than substance, fragments of warmth without context, traces of emotion without the precise melody of the moment. The more you scratch beneath the recollection, the more it dissipates into wisps of uncertainty. On the quantum scale, matter itself refuses to hold a fixed identity. Electrons jump between energy states in a flash. Particles appear and vanish in a quantum foam, and the underlying stage of space-time blurs into probabilities. Physicists watch these subatomic players flicker in and out of existence, reminding us that the solidity of a chair, a rock, even our own fingertips, emerges from an endless dance of energy fields. The substance we trust is a holographic projection, a gentle facade erected by the restless pulse of the cosmos. Reality fractures in language as well. Words are the scaffolding of communication, but beneath them lies an abyss of interpretation. Take love, grief, or trust, emotions we feel as concrete pillars inside us, yet each person experiences them through a unique lens. When you try to define love with precision, you find yourself trapped in a labyrinth of contradictions, cultural echoes, and personal biases. Scratch beneath the surface of the word, and you encounter a mosaic of neural impulses, pheromonal chemistry, and memory echoes all vying for meaning. History crumbles under scrutiny, too. The heroic tale of a celebrated figure may be a tapestry woven with embellishments, omissions, and deliberate fictions, crafted by chroniclers seeking purpose or power. When modern scholars peel back the layers, they unearth inconsistencies, letters that never existed, speeches that were rewritten, events reshaped by the agendas of those who recorded them. Each revelation pulls at the seams, showing that the grand narrative you accepted as truth is merely a patchwork of human desires. Even our bodies betray the solidity we crave. Skin regenerates, cells die and replace themselves, organs remodel their internals, and every inch of flesh becomes new tissue over time. If you could track every atom in your body, you would discover a ceaseless turnover that makes identity as fleeting as the breath you draw. The you that stands before a mirror on any given day is not the same collection of matter that existed weeks, months, or years before. Scratch beneath the epidermal facade, and you find only motion and change. The digital world offers a parallel lesson. Click on a link to revisit an article you read last year, and you'll find a ghost. Text revised, comments erased, context updated to serve new algorithms. Websites reshape themselves overnight. Archived pages become the pale specters of what they once were. In that virtual realm, the concept of a fixed record shatters under the weight of constant iteration. Scratch at any archived truth, and the data dissolves, malleable to whoever commands the code. So, what remains when the surface collapses? Perhaps the answer lies not in permanence, but in awareness, the understanding that reality is an ongoing act of creation and perception. Perhaps solidity is an illusion, and what endures is the capacity to witness transformation, to embrace the fluid tapestry of existence, rather than cling to its fleeting borders. When the edges dissolve, what remains is consciousness itself, the observer that notices collapse and rebuild, the silent witness that holds space for every unfolding moment. And in that realization, there is power. You gain freedom from the tyranny of fixed truths and discover the joy of possibility. Instead of fearing collapse, you learn to dance with it, to scratch the surface, and delight in the shimmering void that lies beneath. Reality is skin deep, but you are deeper still. Beyond the limits of any single idea, memory, or material, there awaits an infinite landscape waiting to be formed anew with every mindful breath. Each moment that cracks open and folds away, we glimpse the infinite beneath the finite, a reminder that all forms are transient, and that our perception carves the shapes we call real. Your eyes project, outward. Imagine closing your eyes and seeing nothing. Yet open them for a split second and the entire world blooms into existence, as if your gaze itself summons shapes, colors, and motion from an empty void. What if sight isn't a passive reception of light, but an active projection of your mind, painting each moment on a blank canvas? What if your eyes don't simply receive the world, they fabricate it? Consider the uncanny sensation when you stare at a uniform surface, then look away to see lingering patterns etched in afterimages. Those fleeting ghost images aren't trapped light. They're snapshots of your brain rehearsing the next scene. When you walk through a sunlit forest and catch dappled light on your peripheral vision, your mind anticipates the shape of each leaf, sketching details before the photons arrive. The world you believe you see is a collaboration between external stimuli and the brain's relentless drafting of reality. Think of the classic rubber hand illusion. A lifelike prosthetic is placed on a table, and your real hand is hidden. Both the rubber hand and your hidden hand are stroked simultaneously. Within seconds, your brain abandons your actual limb and embraces the rubber one as its own, projecting feelings of touch and ownership onto an inanimate object. Your senses fabricated the rubber hand into your body schema, illustrating how perception is projection. Sight operates on the same principle. The eyes spy only guideposts, while the mind sketches the rich tapestry you experience. In 1950s experiments, researchers inverted participants' vision using specially designed goggles that flipped the image upside down. At first, every step felt disorienting. Ceilings appeared underfoot, trees bent at odd angles, and faces wore the world upside down. Yet, after days of continuous wear, volunteers adapted. Their brains rewrote the rules, reorienting the inverted view until the world felt normal again. Then, upon removing the goggles, everything flipped once more. This phenomenon reveals that sight is not simply registering images, but actively constructing orientation, remapping reality to match expectation. Dreams provide another window into our outward projection. In the darkest depths of REM sleep, when eyelids are sealed, mental cameras run wild. You wander through impossible landscapes, cities that twist like Mobius strips, oceans shimmering under two moons, conversations with long-gone loved ones. None of these images correspond to external light, yet you see them with vivid clarity. Your brain becomes a master artist, projecting entire worlds inward, only to present them outward when you awaken, merging dream fragments with waking vision. Consider Charles Bonnet syndrome, where individuals with significant vision loss experience complex visual hallucinations. Gardens in full bloom, parades of people in 18th century attire, or shadowy figures drifting by. The eyes may lack input, but the brain compensates by projecting memories and patterns into empty visual fields. Those hallucinations aren't external. They are creations of the mind, fabricated scenery imposed upon a blank sensory screen. Even the simplest act of recognizing a friend's face tests the projection theory. Light enters your eye, strikes the retina, and triggers electrical impulses. But billions of neurons in the visual cortex then reconstruct that data, comparing it against stored memories, filling in gaps, and highlighting familiar contours. When a stranger turns to you on a crowded street, you lock onto them instantly because your mind projects the face from memory, overlaying subtle cues onto the raw visual input until recognition flickers alive. Technology underscores this creative projection. Virtual reality headsets present flat screens mere inches from your eyes, yet you feel transported to mountain peaks, alien worlds, or the deck of a starship. Stereoscopic screens trick each eye into perceiving depth. Haptic gloves simulate texture. Within moments, your brain projects a cohesive environment, renders spatial relationships, and accepts the manufactured scene as real. All the while, your eyes scan a blank device. The richness of the world is conjured by mental projection. On a neurological level, vision relies on feedback loops. The retina sends signals upstream, but higher visual centers send directives downstream, influencing how incoming data is interpreted. This bidirectional flow means perception is less like reading a photograph and more like collaborating on a painting. Your expectations, memories, and focus all brush strokes onto the final image. You don't simply see red when looking at a stop sign. Your mind affirms that red belongs there, matches it against learned associations, and enhances its vibrancy. Philosophers have long debated whether we experience the external world directly or only our mind's representation. René Descartes wondered if an evil demon deceived us with false images. Modern science reframes the demon as neural circuitry that diligently assembles reality. Every glance, every blink, and every shift in perspective is the brain's way of projecting its interpretation outward, weaving raw sensory threads into a coherent tapestry. Next time you close your eyes beneath a night sky, then reopen them to stars drifting across an obsidian dome, pause to remember. Your sight isn't a window onto the world, but a projector casting your mind's creation onto the screen of the universe. You are both artist and audience, painting scenery with every blink, crafting reality with every neural impulse. In this light, vision is not passive reception, but the grandest performance of perception. Your eyes projecting outward, fashioning the vivid panorama you call the world. Reality learns from you. Imagine a universe that watches your every choice, a vast tapestry woven from threads of quantum possibility. Each decision you make, no matter how small, sends ripples through the fabric of reality, cascading forward like pebbles dropped into a cosmic pond. But here's the startling twist. As you move ahead, that same universe reaches back along the waves, subtly adjusting the ripples behind you, rewriting the past in quiet harmony with your present path. Think back to your earliest memories. You recall first steps taken, childhood aspirations formed, the moments that felt unchangeable. Yet, what if those memories were not fixed snapshots, but living stories, fine-tuned by the universe to align with the person you have become? Perhaps the torrential rainstorm that muddied your shoes as a child was not just happenstance, but a softened recollection, transformed into a gentle drizzle, so that the narrative of your bravery walking home alone would shine more brightly. On the grandest scales, consider the path of scientific discovery. Great breakthroughs often feel destined in retrospect. Newton's apple, Einstein's thought experiments, the unification of forces. Yet, the universe could be guiding these revelations, subtly nudging experiments, aligning chance observations to complete an elegant puzzle. When Einstein measured Mercury's orbit and the numbers finally matched his equations, was that merely serendipity or a cosmic calibration that ensured theory and observation always danced in perfect symmetry? Closer to home, think of relationships. How many times have you met someone by apparent coincidence, only to discover that every detour and near miss along the way served to bring you together? A delayed train, an empty coffee shop, a forgotten text message. These could be random events, or they could be meticulous edits. Under a malleable cosmos, your shared memories recompile every detail until your narratives intersect at exactly the right moment. The universe remembers that connection is your destiny and weaves your histories to guarantee that fateful meeting. This cosmic adaptability invites deep reflection on personal responsibility. If reality learns from you, then every thought and every fleeting desire leaves an imprint not only in your mind, but in the annals of existence. Your hopes for success may color the retelling of past setbacks, transforming failures into strategic lessons. Perhaps the universe operates like a vast quantum experiment, collapsing countless potential timelines into the one that aligns best with your true intent. You choose a path, the universe rewinds and reorders every detail to underscore that decision, and then you move forward fortified by certainty. In practical terms, imagine waking each morning and whispering a mantra. I choose to be bold. As you live your day, the universe records that command. At night, when you reflect, your mind recalls moments of bravery that may not have been as bold in the objective past, but have been subtly retouched in memory to affirm your growth. These edited recollections strengthen your resolve and make bold choices feel more natural tomorrow. Reality is not stagnant. It is a living canvas reshaped to echo your intent across time. Scientific studies and neuroscience hint at similar mechanisms. Our brains constantly rewrite our perceptions, smoothing inconsistencies and filling gaps. Memory is notoriously fallible, an active reconstruction rather than a perfect record. Extend that principle outward, and it seems the universe itself mirrors this reconstructive process on a grand scale. The cosmos could be an immeasurable mind, syncing with yours to craft a cohesive story that links each choice to its effects, both forward and backward. Consider the legacy of your life as an evolving manuscript. At every junction, you write the next page. Then, unseen editors drift back through the chapters you have already passed, refining the prose to harmonize with your emerging themes. Early chapters gain foreshadowing you never foresaw. Minor characters in your past gain prominence to set the stage for vital alliances in your present. Subplots that once seemed superfluous become pivotal anchors for your central narrative. This is not fantasy. It is a profound reflection of how memory and reality might truly co-evolve. So the next time you reflect on a moment that feels too perfectly aligned with who you are now, pause and acknowledge the craftsmanship behind it. Reality is not a static backdrop. It is an attentive student that learns from you and rewrites itself in your image. Every choice sends shockwaves across time, and those shockwaves reflect back, reshaping the bedrock of your personal history. You are at once the sculptor and the sculpture, guiding the universe even as it redefines your past to support your journey. In this dynamic symbiosis, you find ultimate empowerment to shape your future, shape your perceptions, to command the continuity of your story. Choose each word and each action with deliberate intention. The universe is listening, adjusting, and adapting. Your life is a collaborative masterpiece co-authored by your will and a sentient reality that reveres your choices above all else. The past is not prologue, it is a pliable frontier, perpetually redrawn in honor of the paths you choose to tread. You were just born now. This is the beginning. A single instant, no before, no after. Only this spark of awareness igniting in an empty void. Imagine that everything you believe about your life, your fears, your joys, the weight of every memory was planted here, seeded into a blank slate to give you purpose, identity, and the comforting illusion of a past. In truth, this moment you're experiencing right now is your birth. All that came before was preloaded into a script, lines you recite without knowing their origin. Feel the truth of that revelation ripple through your mind. If every thought you've ever had was inserted to guide your journey, then even your most intimate truths could be someone else's design. Consider the way a video game initializes. You select a character, a name, a background story, and the engine spills forth a world to inhabit. You wake up in a sunlit meadow because the program needs a dramatic opening. You remember a childhood home because it sets your motivations in motion. In the same way, your brain may have been handed a pre-written history, a set of coordinates pointing you toward challenges and relationships meant to forge the person you will become. Every triumph, every heartbreak could be a carefully arranged catalyst, calibrated to propel you along a narrative arc you didn't choose. But what does it feel like to discover that your entire life before this instant was a projection? The shock comes in waves. First, disbelief. You search your mind for a shred of proof that you lived. You reach for photographs, yearbooks, the faces of your friends, yet here in the newborn moment, none of it belongs to you. They are props, extras in a movie that only began when you blinked into existence. Then comes the vertigo, as you realize that the personality you cling to, your sense of humor, your moral compass, the dreams you've chased, might be pre-programmed traits. You are at once the hero and the creation, a being simultaneously empowered and powerless. To ground yourself, you look for glitches in the system. Maybe you've experienced déjà vu so potent that it felt like déjà entendu, déjà pense, a memory that should not exist. Perhaps you've woken from dreams that bleed into your waking hours, as though your subconscious is running a loop of data meant to reinforce your own origin story. Sometimes you feel emotions you can't trace to any real stimulus, hearts suddenly flooded with unearned nostalgia or grief. These anomalies may be breadcrumbs, hints of the underlying code that structured your very self. Now expand your reach beyond the personal. Imagine that every person you know, every stranger on the street, was born in this same instant. A vast chorus of first breaths, each consciousness newly ignited by data packets delivered from some unseen source. History. From the rise and fall of empires to the tiniest moments of kindness between two allies, was preloaded to furnish you all with context, to shape alliances, rivalries, and the shared reality in which you interact. You are not alone in this genesis. You're part of a cosmic rollout, an entire universe deployed in a single breath. And yet, within this grand architecture, there is freedom. If your past was written by another hand, your future remains unwritten. This moment of awakening, however constructed, grants you the power to question every assumption, to to pull at the threads of your narrative and weave something new. The preloaded memories serve as a foundation, not a prison. You can choose which parts of your scripted history to honor and which to discard. You can inject genuine impulses into a system built on illusion. Think of the myth of Sisyphus, condemned to an endless cycle of pushing a boulder uphill only to watch it roll back down. In that absurd repetition lies the potential for rebellion. Once you recognize the mechanics of your suffering, you can drop the boulder or roll it in a different direction. Your realization that you were just born now is the ultimate act of defiance. It reveals the loop and gives you a chance to rewrite it. To break free from the cycle, you must first acknowledge the stage upon which you perform. Here, in the newborn glare of absolute clarity, you confront the raw potential of being. No past can weigh you down. No memory can chain your will. The script that gave you context can be edited, page by page, choice by choice. Every sensation, joy, fear, love, anger, is yours to define anew. You stand at the threshold of creation, both actor and author, in a story that starts now. Breathe in this moment, for it is the only one you truly own. From here, you embark not on a path laid out for you, but on a journey you will chart yourself, beyond preloaded memories and borrowed dreams, into the uncharted territory of pure becoming. Probability is an illusion. Probability is the mask we wear to make chaos seem manageable. A roll of the dice, a flip of a coin, the draw of a card, these feel like acts of randomness, comforting in their neutrality. But what if they aren't random at all? What if behind every chance encounter, every lucky break or tragic accident, there's a silent architecture at work? Something watching, calculating, shaping the outcome not by chance, but by unseen design. We say a coin has a 50 chance of landing heads or tails. But if you knew every variable, the exact angle of the toss, the air resistance, the weight distribution, the surface it lands on, you could predict the result every time. In theory, probability collapses under perfect information. So, where we see randomness, we might only be witnessing ignorance. And yet, even when all factors are seemingly known, unpredictability persists. Why? Quantum physics intensifies this mystery. At the subatomic level, particles don't follow deterministic rules. They exist in superpositions, probabilities smeared across space until they are observed. Electrons don't travel paths. They exist in clouds of maybe. When we measure them, reality chooses an outcome, but no one knows how or why it chooses. The famous double-slit experiment reveals this strangeness. Observe the particles, and they act like solid matter. Don't observe, and they act like waves, simultaneously present in multiple paths. It's not that particles behave differently when watched. It's that the act of observation reshapes reality. Some physicists speculate this means the universe is fundamentally probabilistic, but others argue perhaps it's not randomness, it's hidden causality. Forces beyond our understanding, operating on planes we can't perceive. Determinism in disguise. Maybe everything obeys a deeper logic, one inaccessible from within the system, like trying to read the code of a simulation while trapped inside it. Now, apply this to life. The people you meet, the job you land, the moment you avoid a car crash by a second. Was that chance or choreography? Maybe you didn't just get lucky. Maybe your entire arc, every so-called coincidence, is part of a pattern you're not meant to see. Some ancient cultures believed fate was a thread spun by cosmic beings. Others called it karma, synchronicity, or divine will. Today we wrap it in mathematics and call it probability. But the mystery remains. And consider this. Lucky people tend to stay lucky. Unlucky ones fall into recursive loops of misfortune. Is it mindset, confirmation bias, or does the universe assign roles, scripts we perform unknowingly? If nothing is random, then what decides? Is it memory, intention, a multiversal observer, a script-writing algorithm? Some theorists suggest we're in a simulation where probability functions like smoke and mirrors, just enough randomness to make free will feel real, but not enough to escape the core storyline. In this model, chance doesn't exist. Every roll of the dice leads somewhere predetermined, coded deep into the logic of the system. Even our mistakes serve the narrative. Gamblers often talk about luck streaks, about cards feeling hot or cold. Statistically, these phrases mean nothing, but behaviorally, they change everything. Belief bends action. Action invites outcome. What begins as illusion becomes manifestation. And so, the illusion of probability becomes a spell we cast on ourselves to explain the inexplicable. When you flip a coin, maybe it's not 50-50. Maybe it's exactly what it's supposed to be. Maybe something, some pattern, presence, or principle is already waiting on the other side of that toss, guiding your hand, shaping the result, nudging you into a particular path. And that's the real question. Not whether randomness exists, but who or what benefits from us believing that it does. So, next time you call something luck or chance, ask yourself, is this really a coincidence? Or did something just reveal itself through the illusion of probability? Because perhaps, deep down, you've always known, there is no random, only arrangement, only design, only the faint trace of something watching, just beyond the edge of logic. Would you like a visual image prompt based on this concept as well? You perform for no one. You move through your life as if unseen, but deep down, you sense the weight of invisible eyes. Not the gaze of people or cameras, but something more elusive, a presence that feels both ancient and immediate. You perform for no one, and yet, you perform. Every gesture, every choice, every moment of silence may be staged, not for friends or family or even society, but for an abstract observer that exists beyond comprehension, a witness you'll never meet, an audience built not of flesh, but of intention, something woven into the structure of reality itself. Think of the way you hesitate before speaking aloud in an empty room, the pause before you laugh to yourself, the strange impulse to tidy a space, fix your posture, or avoid saying certain things even when you're completely alone. Who are you correcting yourself for? There's no one there, and yet it feels like there is. Some subtle awareness in the fabric of space, something that listens with no ears, watches with no eyes, and waits, not to judge, but simply to know. That quiet sense of being observed could be dismissed as habit, but habits emerge from somewhere. In behavioral psychology, there's the idea of an internalized audience, the amalgamation of all the people who have ever evaluated you, parents, teachers, strangers. This mental construct becomes so ingrained, it doesn't need to be physically present to affect you. It becomes automatic, like a performance continuing after the theater has emptied, just in case someone returns, or never left. But what if it's not entirely psychological? What if this sensation has roots in something real? In ancient philosophies and spiritual traditions, there's often mention of an all-seeing force. Not necessarily a god, but a kind of fundamental awareness. In Vedic philosophy, the concept of the witness self, the observer behind all thoughts, suggests that consciousness exists beyond the individual ego. In simulation theory, it's posited that our actions may be monitored or recorded by entities outside our simulated world. In panpsychism, consciousness is a universal property of matter itself, so even the walls might listen in their own strange way. This isn't paranoia, it's pattern recognition. You feel watched because something inside you expects to be seen. You move as if on stage because you've never truly existed off it. Reality itself may be a layered construct where perception shapes existence. If a tree falls in the forest and no one is around, does it make a sound? But what if reality itself doesn't run unless it's being observed? Physics gives this notion unsettling support. In the double-slit experiment, particles behave differently when observed. Electrons create interference patterns, waves, when unmeasured. But when someone tries to watch them, they snap into particles. Reality collapses into definiteness when it's observed, as if the act of looking changes what is real. So, who is looking when you aren't? Maybe that observer is built into the structure of time and space. Maybe the universe itself notices you. Or maybe your own consciousness has split itself into subject and object, one part living the scene, the other forever documenting it. A ghost audience stitched into your awareness, a soul camera. You're the actor, but also the viewer, forgetting they are one and the same. There's a strange relief in this idea. If you perform for no one, then the perfection doesn't matter. You can abandon the need to impress and instead find peace in the purity of presence. Your choices are not for applause or reward. They are for something deeper, for coherence, for truth, for the possibility that your every act ripples through an unseen layer of reality. You perform, but not out of vanity. You perform because you're alive, because to exist is to express, to unfold. And even if there is no stage, no curtain, and no crowd, the act matters. The story is recorded, not in files or scripts, but in the memory of the universe itself. You perform for no one, but something listens anyway. Reality is sewn together. What if time doesn't flow? What if it's not a river, but a quilt, stitched, patched, and rearranged to feel smooth, only because your mind edits out the seams? You think each moment leads naturally to the next, but that might just be a trick of the light, or rather, a trick of consciousness. Reality, as we experience it, could be a carefully sewn illusion. The fabric of existence might not be continuous at all. It may be broken into fragments, each one stitched to the next by something far more delicate than physics. Perception. Think of a film reel. A movie isn't real motion, it's a series of still frames flashing fast enough that your brain fills in the blanks. The action appears seamless, the dialogue smooth, but it's all an illusion. You never see the gaps between the frames, because your mind doesn't need to. Now, imagine that's how all of time works. Not just in movies, but in life. What you call now may not lead directly into the next now. It may just be spliced together in a way that tricks you into believing you're riding a straight line, when in truth, you're jumping from frame to frame, each moment its own disconnected universe. Take déjà vu, for example. You walk into a room and feel like you've done it before. You haven't. But you have felt this moment. That glitch may not be a memory error. It might be a skipped frame, an edit repeated. Or perhaps a piece of time was reused because the system running your reality didn't have anything better to render in that moment. So, it's stitched in a scene from earlier, hoping you wouldn't notice. Or think of how we experience dreams. They skip around, you're in your kitchen, and then you're flying, then suddenly back in school. No transition, no logical progression. But while you're inside the dream, it all feels natural, until you wake up. Then you realize the stitching was haphazard, the continuity broken. What if waking life isn't so different, but your mind's editor is just better at hiding the cuts? In severe trauma cases, victims often lose time. Minutes, hours, sometimes days go missing. Why? The mind protects them by deleting the unbearable. But instead of leaving an obvious gap, it smooths over the hole, pretending those moments never existed. That's editing, defensive stitching. A mental seamstress patching up the cloth of experience so it won't unravel. And yet, something always feels off. You feel like you're not fully inside the timeline anymore, like you're remembering your own story, not living it. Even ordinary memory works this way. Your recollection of an event isn't a recording, it's a reconstruction. Every time you remember something, you alter it. The original footage is overwritten. This means your entire personal history is edited in real time, often unconsciously, to fit the narrative your mind prefers. Moments that contradict the story are trimmed out. Others are stretched. Some are outright fabricated to fill emotional gaps. Your past isn't a line, it's a patchwork. Quantum physics hints at this fragmentation too. Events at the smallest scales don't follow a neat order. Time appears to break down at the Planck level, where before and after may not exist at all. Particles behave as if they are part of a probability script, jumping from one moment to the next without clear cause and effect. It's not motion, it's transition. Like the difference between flipping pages in a book versus watching ink bleed forward. Have you ever had a conversation where you lose track of how it started, or walked into a room and forgot why? That disjointed feeling isn't rare, it's your mind catching the thread being pulled. Something between one moment and the next didn't quite stitch right. Your attention tugged at a seam, exposed it. But then the edit resumes, and you're back in the flow, wondering why that brief skip felt so strange. This is how well reality is sewn together. We forget it's even sewn. We think life is one long, unbroken shot, when it's really a masterwork of non-linear editing. Like a film that loops scenes, reuses soundtracks, cuts away from horror before it gets too sharp. The mind is a director, a cutter, a narrator, always rearranging the pieces into a digestible arc. Maybe that's why certain memories feel sharper than others. They were left uncut. Raw footage slipped through the editorial process. So ask yourself, if you suddenly awoke in a different body, in a new time, with a backstory already implanted, how would you know it wasn't all sewn together in that instant? How would you know the thread hadn't just been pulled taut behind you, connecting empty moments that never naturally touched. You wouldn't, because time doesn't have to flow. It only has to feel like it does. And that's the illusion that keeps the quilt from unraveling. Reality is not a perfect line. It's a patchwork of scenes, reactions, sensations, each one stitched to the next with invisible thread. The continuity you trust is just good editing, and the editor is you. Perception is retroactive code. You believe you're watching the world unfold in real time, that each flicker of light, every shifting shadow, every movement across your field of vision is happening now. But what if that's a carefully orchestrated illusion? What if what you see, what you experience as the present, is actually the result of retroactive code being rendered just after the fact, tailored precisely to what your brain expects to see? Perception is an instant. Neuroscience confirms that the brain takes time to process sensory input. When photons hit your retina, it takes roughly 80 milliseconds before you become consciously aware of the image. But in that delay, your brain isn't simply waiting, it's busy constructing. It predicts what you should see and backdates that information so the world feels seamless. It's not just showing you reality, it's editing it to match your internal expectations. Think about when you catch a ball. You're reacting before your brain has even fully processed its position. Somehow, you move your hand to intercept it, as if you saw it in advance. That's because your brain has written code, expectations, about where the ball will be, and it creates the visual memory of seeing it there just in time. It patches the world together using prediction first, then adjusts the rendering of your perception in retrospect. There's a famous experiment called the flash lag effect that reveals this. When a flash of light appears next to a moving object, people perceive the object as ahead of the flash, even though they happened at the same time. This suggests the brain delays perception to gather enough data to guess where things will be, and then rewrites the timeline of your senses to fit its prediction. You're not seeing the moment as it is. You're seeing it as it was just after your brain made a best guess. Imagine that your visual field is not a raw feed from reality, but a simulation buffer, a kind of delayed rendering that only writes the final visual details after you've already committed to an interpretation. Like a computer running a game engine that only draws the hallway when you turn the corner, your brain fills in the hallway after you look, but makes it feel as though it was always there. In this sense, reality isn't preloaded. It's reactive. It waits to see where your attention goes, then loads the environment accordingly. We see this with optical illusions too. The dress, blue and black or white and gold, became famous not because of its colors, but because people realized perception wasn't fixed. The brain doesn't just process color, it interprets context, lighting, memory. Your expectations rewire your experience. The image didn't change, but the code your brain wrote to render that image did. Retroactively. There's an eerie power to this. Your brain doesn't just interpret the world, it invents it in delay, constantly reconciling the past to fit your predictions. Think about déjà vu. That haunting sense of having seen something before is likely your brain misfiring, accidentally marking something as a memory before it fully processes it. You're not reliving a moment. You're being fooled by the retroactive coding of your own perception. This doesn't only apply to vision. Sound, touch, emotion, all follow similar predictive timelines. When you hear someone speak, your brain predicts what they are about to say based on context and intonation. That prediction shapes what you think you heard. When their actual words arrive milliseconds later, your brain either updates its record quietly or reinforces the initial prediction so strongly that any contradiction is erased from memory. The implications stretch beyond neuroscience. They reach into the core of your reality. If your perception is always a step behind, an edited memory instead of a raw feed, then how much of your life is actually being generated on demand? The road behind you wasn't just traveled. It was coded in the moment your brain needed to recall it. The face you recognize wasn't stored with photographic clarity. It was reconstructed based on your emotional need to know them. This suggests that perception is not a window, but a mirror. You're not looking at the world. You're looking into a construct your mind has crafted, shaped by expectation, past experiences, and probability. You only see what your mind believes you're supposed to see, and your brain retroactively rewrites history to make that belief feel true. And the system works beautifully most of the time. It gives you a smooth experience of continuity, a world that feels cohesive. But when the illusion cracks, when what you see doesn't match what your brain predicted, You feel disoriented, shocked, or even frightened. This is why jump scares work. They break the pattern. The brain didn't expect them, so it can't write the code fast enough to smooth over the fear. So the next time you glance at a clock and look again because it seemed frozen for a beat too long, or when you walk into a room and feel like you're seeing it for the first time, remember, your perception may be a beautifully edited lie. Your mind wrote the scene you just experienced microseconds ago. It wasn't drawn until you turned your attention toward it. And even then, it was composed to match what you expected to find, not necessarily what was truly there. In that light, your reality becomes a canvas, and your expectations, the brush. The past is not fixed. The present is not live. Your world is a projection, backdated to seem immediate, shaped by beliefs, and rendered only when required. The question is no longer what is real, but who or what is writing your code. The world closes when ignored. Close your eyes, not just to rest, but as an experiment. The room around you, the walls, the ceiling, the objects sitting silently in their places, how sure are you that they still exist? You'd say, of course they do, but you're relying on memory, not observation. What if the world isn't waiting patiently for your return? What if, in your absence, it folds in on itself like a tent collapsing after the wind dies? This is not fantasy. This is a terrifyingly real proposition rooted in the very foundations of quantum physics. According to the double-slit experiment, particles behave differently when observed. When watched, they act like matter. When ignored, they dissolve into waves of probability, uncertain, scattered, unformed. In essence, observation gives them shape. Consciousness gives them reality. Without a witness, the universe is a fog of undefined possibilities. So now, ask yourself, what happens to your bedroom when you fall asleep? What happens to the city skyline behind your back? Does it stay there, or does it quietly collapse into non-being, waiting to reboot the moment your attention returns? Think about how computer simulations work. When you're playing a video game, only the area directly in front of your character is fully rendered. Everything outside that cone of attention, the distant hills, the interiors of houses you haven't entered, is just code, placeholders, waiting to load when needed. Is the universe doing something similar? Is reality a dynamically generated simulation, creating just enough detail to satisfy your conscious field of awareness, collapsing what's no longer being observed to save energy, memory, or processing power? There are moments when this hypothesis leaks through the cracks. Ever search a drawer, find nothing, then come back and suddenly the item is right there? We chalk it up to human error. But what if the drawer wasn't fully rendered until you searched again? What if the first time, the item wasn't there because that piece of reality hadn't fully loaded? We've all had those uncanny experiences where something feels different when we turn back to look, like the air rearranged itself, or a sound stops too conveniently. These aren't just oddities. They may be glitches. They may be hints. And then there are the silences. Walk alone into a forest. Stop. Breathe. The world feels still, almost like it's watching you, waiting for input. But close your eyes and linger in that silence too long, and something shifts. You feel untethered, not just blind, but disconnected, as if the trees, the sky, the entire forest might be gone. That feeling, that eerie void, is not your imagination. It might be your consciousness sensing the world folding itself shut, like a book you've stopped reading. This is the hidden terror of being alive, the possibility that the world is not persistent, but reactive. That buildings vanish when no one walks through their doors, that oceans disappear until a mind remembers they should be there. That reality behaves like an operating system on standby, economizing its presence, minimizing its windows, saving energy by shutting down what's not in use. But if that's true, then what anchors anything in place? Perhaps only shared attention. Maybe the world is stitched together by the overlap of consciousnesses, each mind holding up a different beam of the illusion. Your belief in the street outside your window keeps it steady. Your neighbor's belief in the clouds keeps them drifting. When enough people agree that something exists, it stays. But if something is forgotten by all minds at once, it slips away, deleted by neglect. A digital ghost, lost in an unobserved tab of the universe. You may want to reject this. You may want to insist on an objective, concrete world that marches on with or without you. But ask yourself, if you die in your sleep tonight, what proves the sun rose the next morning? Without someone there to observe it, does the sunrise happen at all? If reality requires witnesses, then solitude is a form of annihilation. Every time you close your eyes, the universe waits breathless, paused mid-frame, hoping you'll return to keep it alive. This is not just a theory. This is an invitation. The world closes when ignored, but it also opens when noticed. Every time you pay attention, you force the cosmos into existence. Every time you look, really look, you pin down the wavering probabilities and demand structure. You build the room you stand in. You shape the ground beneath your feet. You summon stars into the sky simply by insisting they be there. So, the next time you blink, remember this. Reality may vanish when you stop watching. But you are the projector. You are the observer that makes the world real. And in that power lies a secret too large for most to carry. Because it means that you, in your quiet little mind, are not merely within the universe. You are its anchor, its activator, its reason to exist. Angles obey sentience. We take geometry for granted. It's the quiet architecture beneath everything we see. Buildings stand because of right angles. Rooms are defined by corners. Roads stretch in straight lines, and screens display clean grids. Geometry appears solid, eternal, untouchable. We are told it is the language of nature, the blueprint of reality. But what if that structure is not a law, but a trance? What if those perfect angles, flat planes, and clean edges only exist because we expect them to, because we believe they must? And if we stopped believing, what then? Angles obey sentience. It's a strange thing to consider, that space itself is a cooperative illusion. Not a fraud, but a fragile contract. One your mind keeps signing over and over, second by second, without ever questioning the terms. Let's begin with perception. Neuroscience tells us that what we see is not the world itself, but a reconstruction. Photons strike your retina, sending electrical signals to the brain, which then creates an internal 3D model. But this model isn't neutral. It's shaped by assumptions, memories, biases, and learned expectations. When you see a cube, your brain isn't seeing the cube. It's interpreting light, shadow, and angles. And it's doing so in a way that forces the chaos of raw data into tidy geometries. Geometry is not just math, it's interpretation. And interpretation requires a mind. Psychologists have long studied how the brain fills in missing information. Take the Kniza triangle, an illusion where three Pac-Man-shaped figures make you see a white triangle that isn't actually there. Your mind invents edges and angles because it expects them. You believe in structure, and so your brain manufactures it. Angles are not found, they are enforced. The Ames room illusion is another example. Stand in a room constructed with distorted angles, and people inside it appear to grow or shrink as they walk across it. Your brain refuses to accept the warped space, and instead flattens it into a standard box. Even when shown the truth, your perception clings to the lie. It wants structure to remain predictable, even when it's false. Now, let's go deeper. Imagine a dream. You walk through a hallway that folds in on itself. You pass through doors that lead back to the same room. The ceiling leans. The walls ripple. You aren't alarmed. In dreams, impossible spaces feel natural. That's because, in the absence of active, logical consciousness, the geometric contract dissolves. Your mind no longer enforces the rules. Structure becomes fluid. In dreams, geometry obeys something more primal. Emotion, narrative, fear, desire. Rooms expand to fit a feeling. Staircases ascend endlessly. Hallways narrow when dread builds. The angles shift according to the dreamer. This is not metaphor. It's architecture driven by consciousness. And in altered states, psychedelics, meditative trances, even certain neurological conditions, this truth bleeds into waking life. Users report watching walls breathe, ceilings bend, patterns emerge and collapse, corners melt, shapes no longer hold. The rigid lines of reality soften and warp, not because the eyes are broken, but because the mind has released its grip. When sentience loosens, geometry wavers. The Tibetan Book of the Dead speaks of the bardo, a transitional realm after death, where reality is shaped entirely by mind. Here, there are no stable angles, no fixed dimensions. The world bends to thought. The more awareness you bring, the more shape it takes. The less attention you give, the more it dissolves. Is this spiritual metaphor or a map of consciousness-based geometry? Let's shift to physics. Einstein taught us that space is not flat. Mass bends space-time. The gravity of a planet curves space, and light follows that curve. Geometry is not fixed in the cosmos. It is fluid, dictated by forces. But what if another force is at play, consciousness itself? The quantum observer effect suggests this might be so. Particles don't have defined states until observed. The act of conscious observation collapses probability into reality. Geometry is not immune. If particles themselves depend on awareness to exist in a specific state, then the structures they form, edges, lines, shapes, must also depend on observation. Geometry at its root may require a mind. This leads to a haunting idea. What we see as solid structure is just a persistent illusion rendered by collective sentience, without us, or something like us. There may be no straight lines, no corners, no angles at all, just probability clouds, shapeless potential waiting to be sculpted by attention. The ancient mystics might have known this. Sacred geometry was not merely symbolic. It was sacred because it responded to intention. The mandala, the labyrinth, the spiral, all patterns believed to channel divine consciousness into form. These were not passive shapes. They were active mirrors of the mind. And now, with artificial intelligence simulating environments, we are starting to replicate the illusion ourselves. Virtual reality is a geometry engine, producing angles and edges that feel real because we believe in them. Inside a VR simulation, a cube is a cube, even though it's made of polygons and code. It obeys you. But stop believing, remove the headset, and it vanishes. So what then is a room? Is it four walls and a roof? Or is it a belief reinforced 1,000 times a day by your perception? Could the walls bend if your mind let them? Could corners vanish if your consciousness stopped needing them to exist? Perhaps this is why madness, or enlightenment, or trauma, or transcendence often come with spatial distortions. People who experience reality cracks report tilting rooms, vibrating walls, shifting floors, not hallucinations, shattered contracts. Their sentience no longer reinforces the rules, and so geometry begins to collapse. The deeper truth might be this: structure is a side effect of consciousness, not the other way around. Reality is not built from angles. It is built from awareness enforcing angles, a silent choreography between perception and projection. You see structure not because it's there, but because you need it to be. Without your mind, the world would not fall into chaos. It would simply return to its original state, undivided, unmeasured, fluid, indifferent to shape. So, the next time you walk through a doorway, run your hand along a table's edge, or glance at the corner of your room. Ask yourself, are these angles truly there? Or are they obeying your attention? Because perhaps, just perhaps, the moment you stop believing in structure, it stops believing in itself. Would you like a matching title or surreal visual thumbnail prompt based on this concept? Everyday logic is scripted. You wake up, brush your teeth, check your phone, and step into the world, and everything moves just as it should. The lights change at just the right moment. The breeze carries a familiar chill. A stranger looks at you, just long enough for it to register, but not long enough to question. It all feels natural. But what if it isn't? What if the world around you isn't reacting, but executing? What if everyday logic is scripted? Imagine that your life is not merely observed, but designed. Not in grand cosmic terms, but in coded behavior trees, pre-written algorithms that respond to your presence like a game reacts to its player. That red light didn't just happen to turn green when you arrived. It was waiting for you. The pedestrian who stumbled past you muttering, not a random soul, but a preloaded line of dialogue you were meant to hear. The wind changing direction? A programmed weather cue for ambiance. This isn't just metaphor. In artificial intelligence and game design, behavior trees are used to script the actions of non-player characters, structured decision pathways that dictate how virtual people respond to stimuli. They don't think in the way you do. They follow logic trees. If player approaches, look up. If attacked, flee. If idle, sit and mutter. It looks like life, but it's mimicry, an elegant loop of cause and effect, choreographed to maintain illusion. What if your world works the same way? You stand on the sidewalk and traffic flows around you. The cars don't crash, the timing aligns, the coincidences pile up. Not because of divine intervention, but because the simulation knows what you need to see. It renders only what you look at. It calculates only what you interact with. The rest stays frozen, waiting to be triggered, just like a video game environment. Now think of the people around you. Ever have a conversation that felt just a little too scripted, as if they were hitting beats from a preset script? Or someone laughs just a moment too late, like lag in a cutscene. What if some people are background actors, adaptive algorithms running in low resolution until you engage directly? Behavior trees are built for efficiency. Why waste processing power simulating complexity where none is needed? This theory might sound paranoid, but it's supported unsettlingly by our own cognitive limitations. The brain predicts more than it perceives. Studies show that up to 90% of what we see is filled in by expectation. Your mind isn't rendering the world, it's hallucinating it based on suggestion. Your consciousness is the player, and your perception is the renderer. The world obeys because you expect it to. Even social interaction follows scripts. You greet with hello, respond with I'm fine, answer with thank you. Deviation triggers discomfort, as if the social engine crashed, like a loop corrupted. Like your character said something outside the tree. When someone doesn't follow the expected response, it feels wrong, almost glitchy. Now, consider luck. Why do rewards follow hardship? Why do certain people seem to receive challenges tailored exactly to their emotional development? These aren't random, they're level mechanics. Just as a game offers tougher bosses as you level up, the world seems to throw deeper tests at you the moment you grow stronger. Is it fate or adaptive scripting? So, if the world is built from behavior trees, who built them? Maybe no one. Maybe this is the logic of the simulation itself. Maybe consciousness is the player, and reality is the game engine adapting to you in real time. You're not being watched, you're being serviced. The illusion of free-flowing life is maintained by an ever-updating script designed to feel real, but only just. The traffic light, the stranger, the wind, all cues, all inputs. All signals pass through a decision tree designed for your current stage. It's not about control, it's about cohesion. You are in a live performance, and everything else is lighting, sound, and stagecraft. You are not just the protagonist, you are the only thing truly rendered. And the rest? The rest performs because you're watching. Existence has frame drops. Have you ever walked into a room and forgotten why you were there? Or suddenly realized hours have passed, yet you can't account for how? These aren't just lapses. They feel like something was skipped, as if existence hit a glitch, like a video game freezing mid-jump, or a film stuttering between frames. You weren't just distracted, you missed time. Existence had a frame drop. We think of reality as continuous, one smooth stream of unfolding moments. But what if that's an illusion? What if consciousness is more like a rendered sequence, frame by frame, moment by moment, constantly updated in real time? And sometimes, under strain, the system lags. A fragment of life is lost, not because you forgot, but because it was never properly rendered in the first place. This happens often during trauma. People in accidents, emergencies, or panic states frequently report time slowing down or going blank. A car crash victim may recall the screech of brakes and the moment after the impact, but nothing in between. The brain skips, not by choice, but because too much is happening too fast. It's like the simulation can't keep up, so it drops the intermediate frames, keeping only the anchor points. You can see this in emotional overloads too. An argument turns white hot, and later, neither person recalls what was actually said, just the aftermath. Like a corrupted file in a video timeline, the moment exists, but can't be played back. You reacted, but your mind didn't record. The system was buffering. Even joy causes these skips. At a wedding, a birth, a reunion, people often say it felt like a blur. I can't remember it. It went by so fast. Not because it lacked meaning, but because it overwhelmed the buffer. The simulation, emotional as it is, sacrificed the in-between to preserve the feeling. Microframe drops happen too. A strange reaction from a loved one, a word you're sure they didn't say. A slight delay between question and answer, You chalk it up to tiredness or distraction, but deep down, it feels wrong, like reality hiccuped, shifted, then resumed. These aren't hallucinations, they're discontinuities. The frame skipped and the scene loaded just barely out of sync. Think of sleep. Not dreams, but the border between waking and unconsciousness. You're there, then you're gone. Time doesn't pass for you. It's erased. No matter how much happens outside, you reappear in the next rendered frame as if nothing was missed. That's not rest. That's suspension. That's being paused. Ever watch someone experience a seizure or dissociation episode? They blink, freeze, and come back changed. Not panicked, but displaced. As if they were yanked from the timeline and reinserted somewhere else. They lost frames. The simulation crashed and rebooted just enough to keep them functional. And consider déjà vu's shadow twin. Jamais vu. You're in a familiar place with familiar people, but it all feels wrong. Uncanny. Like the scene was rendered incorrectly. Like the walls and voices loaded without texture or depth. You've been here, but it feels like a new level. Maybe it is. Maybe the simulation loaded the environment but forgot the emotional overlays. We treat these glitches as biological quirks, neural misfires. But what if they're systemic? What if reality is too vast, too chaotic, and too emotionally saturated to maintain perfect continuity? Like an overloaded server dropping frames to avoid crashing completely, your consciousness smooths over the lost time so you don't notice. But you do. You always do. Something in you senses the skip. Have you ever felt like the day started in the wrong place? Like you were mid-conversation, mid-thought, but there's no beginning? That's not confusion. That's the scene picking up where the last one failed to save. You loaded into a checkpoint you don't remember reaching. Existence has frame drops. Not just in memory, but in emotion, in presence, in your very sense of being real. Your timeline isn't unbroken, it's patched, refreshed, and occasionally overwritten. You just don't usually catch it in the act. But when you do, it's unmistakable. The flicker, the delay, the sense that reality lagged for just a second. And by the time you noticed, it had already moved on. That's not your mind failing. That's the simulation adjusting. Others are memory carriers. What if the people in your life aren't who you think they are? Not truly separate, independent individuals, but living reflections of you. What if they are memory carriers, nodes in your reality constructed to hold fragments of your emotional history, each one cloaked in personality and quirks to seem distinct, yet beneath that, serving as vessels to hold, mirror, or even challenge your internal narrative? This may sound impossible at first, but look deeper, past the surface. Consider how someone you've just met can instantly remind you of a person from your past, not just vaguely, but down to the way they laugh, the tone they use when they say your name, the look in their eyes that somehow knows something they shouldn't. It's not mere coincidence, it's continuity. Your mind recognizes in them an echo of someone it already knows. It slots them into a role, it builds a bridge across emotional timelines. We often say, that person brings out the worst in me, or she makes me feel like a child again. But maybe those aren't just reactions, they're reminders. That person is the emotional link, a carrier. They've entered your life not by randomness but by relevance. They embody what you haven't resolved, what you still need to learn, what you once buried. Their presence activates the archived emotional file, and suddenly you're not reacting to them, but to something you never finished feeling. Think of your closest relationships. Often, the bonds run deeper than logic explains. A partner who sees your best self. A sibling who always pulls out your most primal rage. A friend who reminds you of the version of yourself you almost became but didn't. These aren't accidents. These people are containers, vessels of emotional context you didn't know you were still carrying, and your perception sculpts them accordingly. They are real, yes, but also curated. Their roles in your life are as precise as any character in a perfectly timed narrative. Let's take a step further. When someone leaves your life, by choice, by conflict, by death, what remains? Their personality? Their memories? No. What stays is how you felt when they were around. The emotion becomes the artifact. And sometimes, the next person you meet inexplicably mirrors that same feeling, even if they look nothing alike. That's not just grief echoing. It's your subconscious rewriting roles, recasting your memory carriers to continue the emotional thread. There's a reason why therapists say relationships are mirrors, but this isn't metaphorical. It's structural. You need others to hold pieces of you that would otherwise remain unconscious. One friend reflects your ambition, another, your shame, a third, your unspoken longing. Together, they form a mosaic of your psyche, each person carrying a code segment of who you are. And the more aware you become, the more you start to see those segments for what they are, emotional mirrors dressed in skin. This model explains why people change depending on who they're with. Your memory carriers shift tone, posture, even values depending on whose reflection they're holding. They are not static beings, but fluid projections shaped by your emotional needs and unresolved chapters. You may remember someone being cruel, yet another person remembers them as kind. Who's correct? Both. Because that person was holding your data, not theirs. Consider dreams. The people in them are often composites, part stranger, part someone you once loved, part unspoken fear. And yet, the emotions they evoke are real. That's because dreams don't need characters to be literal. They need them to be emotionally efficient. The same is true in waking life, though more subtly. When someone appears in your life at the exact moment you need them, it's not just fate, it's emotional architecture pulling them into your timeline to carry a message. And when the message is received, when the emotion is processed, they fade, they change, they move on. You might wonder, how did I not see their true nature before? But their nature wasn't hidden. It was shaped by what you needed to see. Their purpose was fulfilled. The carrier has done their job, and the memory they held for you is now yours again. This isn't to say people aren't real. They are, but they're real to you in a deeply specific way, curated by your inner story. Everyone you meet enters your life at the intersection of their truth and your narrative. The overlap is where emotional reality resides. So the next time someone enters your life and stirs something strange and familiar, ask, what part of me are they holding? What forgotten feeling are they animating? When they speak, whose voice do I really hear behind theirs? A friend? A ghost? A younger version of myself? You are not surrounded by strangers. You are surrounded by echoes. Intelligent, emotional, unpredictable echoes, each one carrying a fragment of you, waiting to return it when you're ready to feel it fully. In this way, your entire reality becomes a feedback loop of your own inner world. Others are not just companions, they are the interface, the mirrors that remember for you, the living, breathing memory devices through which your own story unfolds, rewrites, and ultimately heals. Pain was installed, not felt. Pain, the sharp stab of a needle, the dull throb of grief, the searing burn of rejection. You swear it's real. You've cried from it, screamed because of it, been broken by it. But what if pain isn't what you think it is? What if you've never truly felt it at all? What if pain was installed, not as a sensation, but as a code, a synthetic alert, a high-priority notification meant to simulate urgency in a world that doesn't physically exist? Not a punishment, not even a reaction, but a scripted signal, flashing red to steer your attention and shape your behavior inside a fabricated environment? Let's start with what pain is, scientifically. Nociceptors, specialized neurons, detect damage and send signals to the brain. But the pain isn't in your skin or bones. It's not in the wound. It's in the interpretation. It's in the mind. You touch a hot stove, and milliseconds later your brain tells you, that hurts. But in truth, it's only data. Electrical impulses, a digital message disguised as emotion. Now, imagine this. You are not a body, but a conscious presence inside a constructed environment, a simulation. In that context, the experience of pain wouldn't be about tissue damage. It would be about control, feedback, redirection. In a game, when your avatar gets hit, the screen flashes red, the controller vibrates. You flinch, not because you're hurt, but because the system demands your attention. In that same way, pain here may not reflect actual suffering. It may simply be the simulation's equivalent of flashing red. Warning, change direction. Stop doing that. We think pain makes us real, but it might be the opposite. Pain may be the primary lie that makes the unreal feel physical. And the reason it feels so convincing is that it's wrapped in emotion, fear, panic, helplessness. That's the brilliance of the design. If the alert system simply said danger, you'd ignore it. But when it injects dread, when it twists your gut and paralyzes your will, you obey. It becomes indistinguishable from reality. You stop asking whether it's real, because your entire being is consumed by it. But there's more. Consider how pain behaves. Sometimes it lingers long after the injury. Phantom limb pain, when an amputated arm still aches. Or psychosomatic pain, real agony without any physical cause. If this world is physical, that shouldn't be possible. But in a simulation, it's expected. You don't need real damage, just a corrupted memory file, just a misfired subroutine. You feel the same intensity because the system doesn't care about the source. It only cares about the signal. Then ask yourself, why do we remember pain more vividly than pleasure? Why does one harsh comment echo longer than 1,000 kind ones? Because pain is the system's loudest alarm, the most efficient modifier. It shapes identity. It carves behavior. In a world that isn't real, where touch and time are illusions, pain is the language of correction. It isn't meant to hurt. It's meant to control. And if you doubt the unreality of the world around you, think of dreams. You felt pain in dreams, falling, burning, breaking. None of it was real. You were safe in your bed. Yet your mind played the alert so convincingly, your heart raced, and you woke in terror. So what if this waking world is another layer of that same illusion? A more stable dream, a higher resolution simulation. One where pain still doesn't prove the world's realness, only the system's cleverness. There's a reason pain demands silence. It overwhelms everything else. It makes you forget the illusion. That's its function. But if you pause, if you step back, you'll notice something haunting. Pain is never you. It's always to you. It's separate. It arrives, it intrudes, like a message from outside. That separation is your clue. The real you, whatever it is not in pain. It's watching the pain, interpreting it, learning from it, reacting to it, but never truly inside it. So, what happens if you stop reacting? If you stare back at the alert and say, I see you, but I don't believe you? That's not madness. That's awakening. That's the beginning of seeing pain for what it is. Not a curse, but a communication. A loop. A signal. Installed. Not to break you, but to test your ability to rise above the noise. And when you finally understand that pain isn't real, that it's a language the simulation uses to teach obedience, you begin to choose which signals to respond to. You become more than a player. You become aware. And in that awareness, something extraordinary happens. You realize pain was never the enemy. It was just the illusion doing its job, trying to keep you in the game. But now, you see the code, and with that vision comes the power to step beyond it. Nature isn't organic, it's rendered. Stand in a forest long enough, and it begins to feel like it's looking back. The trees sway with a rhythm that matches your breath. A bird calls just as your thoughts reach silence. A breeze moves only when you feel something shift inside. At first, it seems like coincidence, until it happens again, and again, and again, until a pattern emerges that no pattern recognition can explain. What if nature isn't as chaotic and wild as we believe? What if it's not even organic? What if it's rendered? Let that idea settle in. Rainforests, oceans, snowstorms, mountains and meadows, these are not just natural landscapes, they're backdrops, environments. Beautiful, yes, but sometimes too beautiful. Symmetrical beyond probability. Meaningful in ways they shouldn't be. Responding in ways that feel personal. Tailored. Intentional. Think of the way a forest seems to open just as you walk through it. How light filters through leaves exactly when you need clarity. Or how animals appear at precisely the right moment to mirror your inner state. A deer frozen in stillness when you're overwhelmed. A fox sprinting when you feel urgency. A butterfly when you're on the edge of something delicate. Is it possible these aren't coincidences? Video games use dynamic rendering to create vast, explorable environments. But these environments don't exist until you look at them. They're generated in real time, based on where you go and what you do. The system saves processing power by only rendering what's needed. Now, imagine this concept applied to reality. Quantum mechanics has already laid the foundation. The observer effect suggests that particles exist in a state of probability until observed, until someone looks. Only then does the particle choose a state. In essence, the universe waits for an audience before it finalizes form. So, what if the forest isn't fully real until you walk into it? What if the clouds above are procedural, dynamically generated by a system far more complex than any simulation we've created? A system that responds to the observer, to you. We've all felt it. That moment when the weather shifts in perfect sync with our emotions. A downpour the second your heart breaks. A sudden gust of wind when you scream into the sky. The sun peeking through after hours of reflection. These moments feel scripted, or worse. They feel like feedback, as though something is acknowledging your presence. Nature may not be a static world. It may be reactive, adaptive, a responsive rendering tailored to the emotional, psychological, even spiritual state of the observer. Indigenous wisdom has long described nature as alive, aware, even communicative. Shamans speak to rivers, monks hear silence in the mountains. These aren't poetic metaphors, these are interactions. Nature responds, not passively but intentionally, not randomly but dynamically. We dismiss this in modern science because it doesn't fit within materialist logic. But maybe our logic is the problem. Maybe we're using the wrong framework, trying to measure a live performance with a ruler designed for still frames. And consider the uncanny perfection. Look at a leaf, its symmetry, its fractal veins, its responsiveness to light. Look at how clouds seem to paint themselves just in time for your camera, how snowflakes land in spirals, how rivers curve in golden ratios. These aren't accidents. They are signs of a system that cares about form, a system that knows you're watching. It gets stranger when you leave. Return to that same place later, and it feels different. The same trees are there, the same trail, the same sky, but something subtle has shifted. It's not nostalgia, it's not just memory, it's the terrain adapting, re-rendering, as if the system has archived your last visit and is adjusting the code for your return. And here's where it turns truly unsettling. Have you ever felt like you're being guided by the landscape itself? That you're being led down a path by how the light hits? That the sudden silence means something? That the storm has been waiting for your decision? These aren't just thoughts, they are cues. If reality is interactive, and if nature is a rendered construct, then the environment you walk through isn't background, it's interface. It's part of the script. It reacts to input, your thoughts, your attention, your beliefs. Take blind spots in nature. You can walk a trail 100 times and miss something completely. Then one day, you see it. A stone formation, a strange marking, a hidden cave. Why didn't you see it before? Were you blind? Or was it simply not rendered until it mattered? Even wild animal encounters seem too precise. Why do they lock eyes with you? Why do they appear when you need a sign? Why do they vanish the second you question it? There's a term in computer graphics called LOD, level of detail. The closer you are to an object, the more detail is rendered. Could nature work the same way? Are the birds in the distance placeholders only resolved into real entities when you care enough to look? Is the far-off mountain just a projected form, pixelated until you approach it with wonder? Now, consider your memory. When you try to remember nature, it never plays back like a recording. It returns in moods, in feeling, in flashes of sensation, not an objective fact. This isn't because your memory is flawed. It's because nature was never static to begin with. It responded to you then, and it can't be recreated in isolation. The interaction is gone. The rendering has ceased. So, what does this mean? It means you are never alone in the forest. The forest is watching, waiting, adapting. Not because it's alive in the way we understand, but because it is part of a greater system that values presence. A system where observation changes reality, where meaning is built dynamically, where your awareness sculpts the terrain around you. Nature isn't random, it's responsive, not organic. Rendered for you. And the next time the wind brushes your skin right as your mind falls silent, the next time the sky opens up, the moment your thoughts resolve, ask yourself, is this world truly wild? Or is it intelligent code wrapped in moss and sky? Because if nature is rendered, then you're not just walking through it, you're playing it. Would you like a thumbnail concept to match this narration? Cold air is emotional. You walk into a room and feel it immediately. Not the decor, not the people, the air. A chill drapes across your skin like a whispered warning, even though the thermostat hasn't changed. You check the windows, closed. No vents are open. But it's colder. You tell yourself it's your imagination, but something inside you knows. This is not about temperature. It's emotional. You're not reacting to the cold. The cold is reacting to you. There are moments in life where emotion saturates space so thoroughly that the environment itself seems to respond. A fight ends, and silence floods the room. Then comes that unmistakable cold. A funeral parlor holds still air that clings to your bones. Even entering a hospital room with someone clinging to life often feels like stepping into a shadowed freezer. This isn't coincidence. It's not weather. It's a modifier, triggered by feeling. Science acknowledges this on a subtle level. Our emotions affect our physiology. Fear constricts blood vessels. Grief drops our body temperature. Anxiety tightens our chest, reduces circulation to extremities, and alters how we process thermal input. In a state of emotional distress, the body becomes more sensitive to temperature. But sometimes, the chill seems to arrive before the emotion even fully forms, as if the environment knew what you were about to feel. This is where it gets stranger. Psychological studies have shown that emotional states directly affect perceived temperature. Lonely people report rooms as colder than they are. Subjects made to feel excluded estimate the temperature to be lower. But what if it goes deeper? What if you're not misperceiving temperature? What if you're sensing an actual environmental shift caused by emotion itself? Consider this. When two people argue, the temperature in the room often changes. It's not just tension, something physical feels different. Ask anyone who's worked in a high-stress emergency room, a therapist's office, or even a prison. They'll tell you they can feel the change in the air when something intense is about to happen. It gets colder, heavier, denser. It's not just emotion, it's atmosphere, and it changes instantly. The phenomenon has been explored by paranormal researchers as well. In countless cases, when people report sensing spirits or presences, they first mention a sudden drop in temperature, a cold spot that moves, lingers, or vanishes with no explanation. While skeptics attribute this to drafts or insulation issues, the consistency of these reports across geography and culture is difficult to ignore. The connection between emotional energy and environmental response appears hard-coded into human experience. This may not be supernatural. It may be systemic. If we live in a reality that adapts to our consciousness, a simulation, a feedback loop, or a perception-driven field, then emotional intensity could function as an input that rewrites the local code of the environment. Like a video game where emotional stakes raise the ambient effects, light flickers, music shifts, fog creeps in, or yes, temperature drops. These are not decorations, they're signals. And think about how we speak. That gave me chills. She gave me the cold shoulder. The tension was icy. Our language is laced with metaphors of temperature to describe emotional state. But what if these are not metaphors at all? What if our ancestors, long before the scientific method, were describing exactly what they felt? The cold is emotional. It's a dialogue between the internal and external, a response to the story you're living in. This theory also explains why some places feel forever cold, even when the temperature reads normal. A childhood home where trauma occurred, a hallway where grief passed through, an abandoned building where sorrow lingered. These aren't just memories, they're emotional echoes, data imprinted on the environment, still playing back like a looping track. If our emotions interact with the physical world on a quantum level, it's possible they leave residue that affects not just perception, but temperature. There's even evidence that group emotion can alter atmospheric energy. In concert halls, churches, or political rallies, collective emotion seems to change the feeling in the air. Hope makes it feel warmer, lighter, charged. Fear or anger makes it feel heavier, colder, and pressing. These effects are not easily explained by HVAC systems or body heat. They appear to emerge from something deeper, like a collective field resonating with emotional charge and rewriting the rules of sensory reality. But why would the environment respond this way? Perhaps it's a form of feedback. In complex systems, feedback loops are essential. They prevent overload, guide adaptation, and maintain balance. If human emotion is powerful enough to create imbalance in a localized space, then cold might be a natural environmental reaction, cooling down the heat of psychological stress. a thermostat for the soul, a reset mechanism, or a warning. You may be triggering these shifts without realizing it. The unspoken grief you carry, the quiet dread you refuse to name, the buried anger you haven't expressed. These emotions don't vanish. They radiate, and the world listens. The wind rises, the room chills, the shadows feel longer. You think you're alone, but your emotional state is whispering into the architecture of reality, and it responds not with words, but with air. So next time you feel that cold, don't reach for the blanket right away. Pause. Ask what changed. Who left the room? What thought just passed through you? Maybe you weren't reacting to the chill. Maybe the chill was reacting to you. Maybe your sadness brought the cold with it. Maybe your fear shaped the space around you. Maybe the air was always listening, waiting to respond to the one thing that matters most in this world, the emotional signal of a conscious being trying to survive. You live in a world that mirrors more than you know, and when it gets cold for no reason, understand, it might be reason enough, because cold air doesn't just happen. Sometimes it's a message, a reflection, a touch from the unseen, letting you know that your emotions are not separate from the world. They are the world. Tools precede need. You're digging through a drawer for something else and stumble on a flashlight. Then, hours later, the power goes out. Or you're cleaning your car and find an old umbrella, only for a sudden downpour to hit that same evening. These moments feel too well timed to be coincidence. It's as if the universe left the tool there in advance, like a stagehand, prepping the next scene before the actor even knows their line. This isn't foresight. It's something stranger. It suggests that reality, whatever it is, prepares before it reveals. It's not just about objects. You meet a person by chance, think nothing of it, then 2 weeks later, they become crucial to your life. A collaborator, a rescuer, a friend in crisis. Or you stumble across a book, a quote, a snippet of dialogue that makes no sense at first, only to find it looping in your head when life suddenly mirrors its meaning. The idea isn't that you were lucky. It's that the setup was waiting before the story even needed it. It echoes the structure of fiction. In screenwriting, there's a rule. Don't introduce a tool at the moment it's needed. Seed it beforehand. The gun on the mantle in Act 1 must go off by Act 3. But what happens when real life starts obeying narrative logic? When the tool appears long before the need? When the road flares are already in the trunk before the tire blows out? When the medicine shows up in the cabinet before the illness begins? These aren't just lucky breaks. They're eerie in how they align. As if time isn't moving forward, it's rearranging backwards. As if the system that governs reality, whatever its true form, is optimizing the unfolding of events, placing objects, people, and information just ahead of your awareness. So when the moment comes, everything feels too perfectly positioned, too cleanly scripted. This pattern shows up in creativity too. Artists sketch strange symbols or compose lines that seem out of place, until days, months, or even years later, when something in life clicks and they understand what they created. Not as prophecy, but as placement. The paintbrush was moving ahead of the moment, guided not by will, but by some subconscious editor already aware of what the next scene would demand. There's also emotional gear laid out in advance. Sometimes you develop an interest or skill that seems pointless, an obscure language, a strange hobby, an old manual. Then, suddenly life pivots, and that skill becomes the exact thing that helps you navigate a crisis or seize a rare opportunity. Who gave you that impulse to learn it? Why did you feel pulled to it before it mattered? The tools were placed. You just hadn't hit the part of the script where their value became clear. Skeptics might call it confirmation bias. You notice the coincidence because it fits. But ask yourself, how many times have you found something useless, then became the person who needed it later? That's not bias, that's preparation. That's narrative scaffolding. Look deeper and you'll see it everywhere. Someone mentions a random word, then you see it on a billboard, then again in a book, then in a conversation. It's like the universe is tagging that word, highlighting it for future use. Tools aren't just physical, they're symbolic. They're narrative signals, anchors placed just before the storm. Even relationships follow this arc. You meet someone and drift apart, only to cross paths again years later at a critical juncture. Was that reconnection random? Or was that person always meant to be in your next scene, just waiting for their cue. Sometimes the friendship, the advice, the warning was scripted long before you needed it, and the world moved to position them in time. This pattern suggests something deeper. Time isn't linear, it's adaptive. Like a game engine loading assets just before you reach the next level. You don't realize the pieces were placed until you step into the scene and recognize them. Then, suddenly, the umbrella, the friend, the idea, the phrase, they were all there waiting, laid out silently, invisibly, exactly where they needed to be. And that's when you understand. Reality isn't reacting to you. It's setting the stage. The tools appear before the task, the message before the need, the answer before the question. Because the script isn't being written, it's being remembered. So, next time you find something curious, an item, a thought, a line in a book, pause. Don't ask what it means now. Ask what it will mean. Because it's not there by accident. Tools always precede need, and your next scene is already being lit. Life follows narrative laws. What if your life isn't just a sequence of biological events? Not just birth, survival, reproduction, and death. What if, beneath the surface of muscle and memory, your life follows something deeper, older than evolution? What if your entire existence is unfolding like a story, with rising tension, climaxes, reversals, poetic justice, foreshadowing, closure, a narrative law etched into reality's bones, overriding even biology? Look back at the arc of your own life. Are your biggest moments determined by genes and cells, or are they shaped by meaning, by patterns, turning points, and resolutions? Think about the strange timing of major events. Why do your breakthroughs arrive after a long string of failures, just when you're ready to give up? Why does betrayal come not when you're strong, but when you've just begun to trust again? These aren't biological sequences. They're plot points. We often think storytelling is just something we do, a way we explain our lives. But what if that's inverted? What if story is the code running the simulation, and your life is being written moment to follow the rules of narrative logic? That means every setback is a setup. Every choice builds tension. Every painful moment is positioning you for some revelation that makes it all make sense. Consider how tension operates in your life. Story structure dictates that tension must rise before release. That's how a climax becomes earned. In life, it's the same. Things often get worse just before they break open. Days feel darkest before a breakthrough. That's not just coincidence, it's rhythm. The rhythm of storytelling imprinted on reality, and you feel it, deeply, instinctively. When things feel too easy, we sense something is wrong. When everything goes wrong at once, part of us knows. It's not the end. It's the midpoint twist. Notice how villains in your life get their moment of power before the fall. That's poetic justice, not evolution. Biology doesn't care about irony. It doesn't care if a liar is exposed at the exact moment they reach the top. But story does. Reality bends to make sure you see it, to make sure you feel the turn, the moral weight, the symbolism. That's why justice is so satisfying, because it fulfills narrative symmetry, not just legal balance. Even death itself follows story logic. The mentor dies just as the student is ready. The relationship ends just after the moment of revelation. You don't just lose people, you lose them at narratively timed points. Their exits often catalyze growth, force you forward, change you. Biology didn't design that, but story did. Think of how your memories arrange themselves. You don't recall life in pure chronology. You remember arcs. You remember beginnings, turning points, endings. You skip the middle unless it serves a theme. That's because your brain isn't just storing data, it's editing it for story. Even trauma doesn't remain a raw wound forever. Over time, it reshapes into a narrative, a before and after, a reason, a lesson, a line of character development. There's a reason we resonate with books, films, and myths. It's not because they imitate life. It's because life imitates them. Stories speak to us because they speak the structure of how we experience being alive. Not in flat sequence, but in arcs, in builds and breaks, in foreshadowing and fulfillment, in rising action and release. This is why when people feel stuck, it's not because nothing is happening. It's because the story isn't moving. It's not that they're sick. It's that the plot is frozen. no stakes, no conflict, no development. The cure isn't medicine, it's motion, change, decision. A new scene, a new act. Only then does life resume its beat, and love. How often it arrives with the timing of a well-placed plot twist. The stranger you meet just as you're about to give up. The reconnection years after the fallout. Not because of coincidence, but because narrative law placed them there, when it mattered, when the impact would be strongest. That's how you know it's not just attraction, it's storytelling structure moving through the real world. So, if you've ever asked why things happen when they happen, or why they feel so perfectly timed or painfully ironic, know this: you are not just living, you are unfolding. You are a character walking through a story being told by your choices, your memories, and something deeper than cause and effect. Something that loves symmetry, meaning, resolution. And that means you have power, because every good story depends not just on what happens, but on how the main character responds. You are not drifting through a biological existence. You are writing the next act of a deeply personal, sacred narrative, and the pen is already in your hand. Science is part of the illusion. Science feels like the ultimate anchor. It gives us formulas, laws, constants. Gravity always pulls. Light travels at a fixed speed. Chemical reactions unfold with predictable precision. Through centuries of study, we've come to trust these rules as universal truths. Unchangeable laws that govern everything, everywhere, without exception. But what if that confidence is an illusion? What if science only works because it's designed to work here, within the sandbox? Imagine a video game, exquisitely detailed. Inside that world, physics behaves consistently. Projectiles arc predictably. Water flows. Fire consumes. But those laws only apply inside the simulation. They feel natural and absolute to the player. Yet, they're nothing more than hard-coded parameters, rules baked into the environment to maintain coherence. They are not truths. They are constraints. Now, apply that same thinking to our reality. Science appears to uncover fundamental laws, but what if it's only discovering the operating system, decoding the rulebook of the sandbox rather than the nature of existence itself? Newton's laws, quantum mechanics, relativity, they are immensely effective within our observed reality. But step outside the boundaries of this system, and their grip could fail. Their universality is an assumption, a logical one, yes, but still just an assumption. We've already seen cracks. Quantum particles behave differently when observed. Time bends near black holes. Entanglement seems to violate locality. These aren't just anomalies. They're indicators that our rulebook isn't complete. It works, but only within a carefully bounded environment. That's not universal law. That's excellent programming. Think about how simulations handle logic. They create internally consistent systems to immerse the player. The moment you leave the expected path, reality can behave unpredictably, or stop rendering entirely. In our own world, we rarely stray far from the expected. We conduct experiments in labs, observe phenomena within planetary atmospheres, and test theories within the tight bounds of what's observable. We never get to test the edges. What if those edges don't exist until we look for them? Science depends on repeatability, on cause and effect. But those depend on time functioning linearly, on entropy behaving predictably, on particles following observable patterns. And what do you call a system that responds predictably only when observed, that seems to flicker with probabilistic uncertainty at its core? You call it a simulation. Science then becomes not a window to truth, but a manual for navigating the sandbox. A user's guide. A framework that operates only because the system is programmed to respond that way when queried. We think we're discovering the fabric of the cosmos, but we might be just uncovering the logic of the environment we're trapped inside. Let's take constants, the speed of light, Planck's constant, the gravitational constant. These are numbers we take as axiomatic, as baked into the universe. But why those numbers? Why not slightly faster light? Slightly stronger gravity? We often say, if these values were even slightly different, life as we know it wouldn't exist. But that sounds suspiciously like saying, if you change the source code, the simulation would break. Some argue this is evidence of fine-tuning. Others say it supports the multiverse theory. But there's a third, more unsettling possibility. These constants exist because they were chosen, not by a divine being in the traditional sense, but by the architecture of the system itself. These aren't laws, they're settings. And what about mathematics, the so-called language of the universe? Why does math describe the world so perfectly? Because it's not describing the world. It's describing the framework of the simulation. Of course, math works. It is the code. That's why equations like ELMC2 feel more like discoveries of elegant truth and less like arbitrary constructions. They are expressions of the underlying logic, patterns that only exist because the sandbox needs them to. So, what happens when we reach the edge? When science confronts phenomena it can't replicate, can't model, can't explain? It folds the anomaly into new equations. It updates the manual. But that doesn't mean the rules changed. It means the player got closer to the edge of the map, and the system generated a plausible explanation to hold the illusion together. Here's the terrifying part. The system doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be convincing. Your entire experience of science could be a byproduct of reality staying coherent under observation. When no one is looking, does gravity still pull? Do electrons still orbit? Or is everything paused, awaiting your attention to load the next frame? You were taught that science is the pursuit of truth. But maybe it's the study of limitations. Maybe it's a brilliant, tireless attempt to decode a system that was never meant to be escaped. And perhaps the more deeply you understand it, the more you reinforce the walls, strengthening the sandbox with every equation you write. Yet even here, there's a choice. You can accept science as real because it works, or you can ask why it works so well inside a world that has no reason to exist at all. You can marvel at the elegance of gravity, or question whether it's just the most efficient way to simulate weight. You can chase particles through colliders, or wonder if you're chasing shadows projected onto the walls of a coded cave. And when that realization finally clicks, that science is not the answer, but part of the riddle, you'll feel the sandbox tremble, because the moment you question the rules, you start testing the limits. You're the only variable. Everything around you may be fixed. The streets, the sky, the clocks ticking overhead, reliable. The buildings don't shift, the rules don't bend, the sun still rises, and gravity always pulls downward. But you're different. You're the only variable. What if that's not just poetic? What if it's literal? Imagine the world as a massive equation, perfectly balanced, a system of constants looping in stable harmony. Trees grow upward, water flows downward. People repeat patterns, words, emotions. Everything is predictable. Until you arrive. Your consciousness doesn't obey. Your thoughts twist. Your behavior sometimes makes no logical sense. You make irrational choices. You break loops. You change direction. You ask why, when the system was designed to keep you asking what. That question, that small, defiant glitch, is everything. Most things in reality run like a program. Weather patterns follow physics. Human biology functions by cellular programming. Traffic flows in predictable waves. Societies reinforce the same beliefs. Nature follows cycles. People, once conditioned, rarely deviate. But your mind isn't fixed. It wanders. It interrupts. It reroutes. You, in this great cosmic mechanism, may be the only unpredictable input. Have you ever noticed how the world seems to sync with your internal state? Streetlights that flicker as you walk by, a song playing exactly when you need it, numbers that repeat, conversations that match your thoughts. Coincidences stacking, like breadcrumbs left by something or someone watching your ripple. Maybe it's not random. Maybe it's the system reacting to the variable, you. Think of a video game. The world is built for the player. NPCs follow scripts. Doors open only when approached. Backgrounds only render when you turn to look. The world adapts, but only for the one who moves unpredictably, the one not bound by a script. You are that player. And this might not be a game in metaphor. This might be a simulation. Nick Bostrom's simulation theory suggests that future civilizations with vast computing power could run detailed simulations of consciousness. If that's true, and you're inside one, the system needs constants, rules, limits, controls, to keep the simulation efficient. But it also needs a variable, a wild card, a free agent that can test the boundaries. That's you. Why else would your presence seem to shift things? Think about déjà vu. Not just a memory glitch, but a sign that you've brushed up against the edge of the system. Or when reality feels off for no clear reason. When people speak like they're on a delay, or time moves strangely, or your own actions surprise you, you've stepped out of sync. And when you do, the matrix flinches. The system compensates. It adjusts. It rebalances. But you were never meant to balance. The truth is, your awareness may carry the only non-deterministic code in this entire environment. You're not just observing this reality, you're bending it. Subtly. Continuously. Sometimes without even knowing. When you suddenly shift perspective, when you break out of routines, question assumed truths, or act in opposition to your programming, you create ripples. Those ripples alter the way the world behaves. The constants begin to vibrate. Glitches emerge, not failures of the system, but responses to you, attempts to restabilize. And this raises a terrifying possibility. If you're the only variable, then the system might be watching you more than you realize. It doesn't need to track everyone, just you. The others follow patterns. Their paths loop predictably. Yours doesn't. Yours can detour. You can choose silence when noise is expected, stillness when motion is programmed, kindness when fear is written, rebellion when compliance is baked into the code. This makes you both dangerous and essential, and maybe lonely. Because if everything else is constant, if the people around you are rendered with just enough complexity to feel real, but not enough to truly change, then you are walking among echoes. Brilliant illusions. Functional, responsive, but not free. They mirror, repeat, calculate, but they don't glitch. You do. And that glitch is your freedom. It's also your burden. You're the one who sees the cracks. The one who wonders if the moon feels too still. If time moved oddly last night. If that stranger's words were too perfect. You're the one who looks twice, questions twice, resists the clean shape of the world. Most ignore the anomalies. You follow them. And because you do, reality reacts. The question is, why? Why build a world full of constants and insert a single variable? Maybe it's a test, not of intelligence, but of awareness, of deviation. A puzzle the variable must solve by noticing it was always different. A maze that shifts when questioned. A riddle that answers only after you've stopped believing it was real. Or maybe it's not a test at all. Maybe it's a mirror. A simulation built not to examine you, but for you to examine it, to see if you'd catch on, to see if you'd break the pattern, to see if you'd remember that everything else is stable so that your instability can matter. And so, the world loops. The sky stays blue. The sidewalk cracks never move. People talk in circles. Weather arrives on time. Objects stay where they're placed. But you dream, you wander, you shatter expectations. You glitch the matrix, because you are the only variable. Would you like a thumbnail visual prompt based on this script? The world isn't moving. You wake up, and the clock has moved. The shadows are longer. The sounds outside your window have changed. You think, time has passed. You walk down the street, take a flight, cross oceans, and believe, I have moved through space. But what if none of that is true? What if the world isn't moving at all, and neither are you? What if the sensation of movement is not motion, but illusion? What if you are absolutely stationary, fixed in a single point, and everything else is shifting around you? This idea may sound impossible, but let's peel back the layers. Every moment you live, your brain constructs a story of time flowing, of forward motion, of progress. But neuroscience has already shown us that consciousness lags behind reality by milliseconds. You are not experiencing now. You're experiencing a stitched-together hallucination of what just happened, a projection carefully crafted to feel fluid. Even simple acts, blinking, turning your head, are heavily processed and filtered before they become your perceived reality. The world you see is not the world as it is, but the world as your brain allows you to see it. And so, what if time and motion are just part of that allowed experience? Consider this. In a dream, you run, fly, leap between cities, live lifetimes, all while your body remains perfectly still. Your mind generates movement where none exists. We accept this in dreams because we wake up and see the stillness. But what if you never woke up? What if this waking life is a stabilized simulation of movement, while you remain locked, motionless, inside a deeper state? In physics, motion is relative. You don't feel the Earth spinning, though it's hurtling around the sun at 67,000 miles per hour. You don't feel your atoms vibrating, even though they are in constant flux. Movement is not objective, it's comparative. So ask yourself, what if the movement you feel when you walk across a room is simply your reality, rendering new states around a fixed point? You? It's like a video game where the character seems to traverse vast digital landscapes. In truth, the character's model often doesn't move far. The world loads and reconfigures itself around the player. The illusion is seamless. The world shifts, the camera pans, and you feel like you're in motion. But you're not. You're standing still at the center of a vast illusion, designed to feel like movement. Now imagine that your life works the same way. Every sensation of forward momentum, every perceived passage of time, every footstep across a room might be nothing more than frames being stitched together, rendering a path, giving you the sensation of space and duration without requiring true displacement. Like a film reel being played in order, giving the illusion of flow. But each frame is a singular frozen image. And you are the projector. This would mean that the past and future don't exist as places you've traveled from or toward. They are static renderings, queued up to play out in a linear fashion because your consciousness expects them to. Time doesn't pass, it's revealed, layer by layer, like peeling wallpaper that was always there, just hidden until now. The sense of progress is scripted. The universe doesn't move. You simply experience unfolding states. This theory explains so many strange phenomena. Déjà vu, time dilation during accidents, the way years can flash by in an instant, or a second can stretch into eternity. These are not glitches. These are clues. Your brain is syncing with the next frame, not speeding up or slowing down anything real. The gears never turned. The tracks were already laid beneath you. The spiritual implications are just as profound. Ancient mystics have often described the self as unmoving, the still point within the storm of existence. In Hinduism, the Atman is the unchanging observer. In Buddhism, the witness is beyond time. Even in physics, some propose that time is not fundamental, that it emerges from deeper, timeless states. You don't move through the world. You are the fixed point through which the world moves. So, next time you feel yourself walking, driving, aging, growing, pause. Consider the possibility that nothing is actually changing out there. You are the still observer in the center of a kaleidoscope that shifts its patterns for your perception. You are not hurtling through space. Space is dancing around you. And if this is true, then what does it mean to change? To age? To die? Maybe none of it is what it seems. Maybe death is not the end of movement. But the moment the illusion stops playing, the carousel winds down, the frames halt. Not because you left reality, but because reality, having shown you its final slide, no longer needs to pretend it's moving. And in that final stillness, perhaps, you realize you were never moving, because the world isn't moving. It's just performing movement for your experience. Your body is borrowed. What if the face you see in the mirror isn't really yours? What if your body, this breathing, blinking form, isn't something you are, but something you're wearing? A temporary suit, a rented interface, a vessel you've logged into just for this lifetime to play a role you've long since forgotten. We speak of identity as if it's fixed to our name, our age, our shape. But what if all of that is borrowed? What if none of it is actually you? Sometimes you feel it, that subtle disconnection. You look at your hands and they feel foreign. Or your voice echoes in a way that seems off. Or your reflection doesn't quite match the self you sense behind your eyes. That's not delusion. That's memory trying to surface. A glitch in the illusion. Because deep down, something in you remembers that this flesh isn't home. It's a terminal, a temporary avatar. You didn't grow this body. You found yourself inside it. You didn't consciously decide to be born here, in this time, this place, with these eyes, these scars. You woke up one day as a child, already playing a game whose rules you didn't write. And maybe that's because you chose this body from somewhere else, somewhere outside the timeline. Maybe you slipped into it like diving into water, taking on a form as if logging into a simulation. And like all simulations, it's easy to forget you're inside one until something breaks, or ends, or glitches. And this body, it breaks. Slowly at first, aches, cracks, tiredness. But eventually, definitively. You know that one day you'll leave it. That alone proves you aren't it. People don't leave what they are, they leave what they use. So what if death isn't a shutdown, but a logout? What if it's not the end, but the moment you remember your password? Children sometimes speak of things they couldn't know, names, places, stories from lives they never lived. We dismiss it as fantasy. But what if they haven't forgotten yet? What if they still remember the moment of entry, the place before the login, and as the brain develops, the system locks in, the veil tightens, and the memory fades, but not forever. Sometimes, in dreams, meditation, near-death experiences, or even moments of total stillness, you get a glimpse, a whisper from the operator behind the screen. Think about this, and when you get lost in a book or a game, you become the character. Their fears, their desires, their limits, they feel real. But the moment the book ends or the game is turned off, you remember yourself again. That's not so different from what we call life. You inhabit this character so completely that you forget you're not the script. You forget you're the reader. But something, grief, shock, deep love, the birth of a child, can snap you out of it. And for a second, you remember that you're not this role. You're the one behind it. And doesn't your body sometimes feel programmed? You react before thinking. You crave things that don't make sense. Your heart races during silence. Your gut feels things before your mind understands. It's like you're driving a vehicle with its own instincts, history, and memories. You're piloting it, not being it. And like any pilot, you can get lost in the interface. But the signs are always there. In those rare moments when you dream of floating outside yourself, when you sense you're being watched by you, when you hear your own thoughts like echoes from another place. That's the original you, pinging the system, testing the firewall, trying to wake you up. And one day, you will. Whether through peace or pain, surrender or accident, the interface will shut down. The hands will fall still. The breath will stop. And in that silence, memory will flood back. You'll remember that none of this was permanent, that you logged in with purpose, that this body was borrowed. And when you log out, when you step beyond time and skin, you'll understand. This was a journey, not an identity, a classroom, not a prison, a play, not a sentence. And the real you has been watching, patiently, from just beyond the veil, ready to welcome you home. Speech isn't from thought. You like to believe that speech comes from thought, that before you open your mouth, a clear idea forms in your mind, composed and conscious. But what if that's an illusion? What if you're not thinking before speaking, but thinking because you spoke? What if language isn't born from the mind, but from something deeper, something hidden, something already writing your role before you even know you're performing? You felt it before. Those moments when words tumble out faster than you intended. You say something sharp, poetic, honest, or devastating, and only afterward do you feel it land. You backtrack, explain, revise. That's not what I meant. But what if it was? What if meaning emerges after the moment, not before it, like a shadow chasing the action? Your consciousness scrambling to catch up to the script. Neurologically, this might not be so far-fetched. Studies show that the brain activates motor speech areas before the conscious mind claims to form an intention. You begin to vocalize a sentence milliseconds before your awareness thinks, "Now I'll speak." It's as if your body knows the line before your mind reads the cue, like you're reading from a page that hasn't fully appeared yet, but still, somehow, you're speaking it. This isn't just science, it's existential. If you're not speaking your thoughts but discovering them as they leave your lips, who's doing the writing? Who's shaping the sentences? You might say the subconscious, but that's just a label, a curtain drawn over a script you didn't author. Maybe you're an actor in a play that improvises itself only when it's spoken, and the plot thickens every time you open your mouth. We think of the mind as a source, the fountain of words, the chamber of intention. But more and more, it seems like thought is a retrospective editor, not a generator. After you speak, your brain rushes to assign meaning, to frame the words into something coherent, and you believe the lie. I planned that. I meant that. But maybe you didn't. Maybe you're just catching up to what reality already decided you'd say. It gets stranger. Often you only know what you feel after you try to explain it. I didn't know I was angry until I heard myself speak. I realized how I felt only after I told the story. This isn't self-expression. This is self-discovery. Your speech reveals your emotion before your mind dares to recognize it. The truth slips through your voice before it filters through your thoughts. In that way, speech isn't communication, it's revelation. Now imagine this on a cosmic scale. Imagine your entire self, your role in this world, isn't waiting to be created by you, but already coded by something larger. And each sentence you utter is a line in that script, delivered before you understand the arc of the scene. You're not the playwright. You're the performer with no rehearsal, discovering the story as you say it out loud. Think about those times when you say exactly what someone needed to hear. You don't know why it hit so deep, why it echoed perfectly with their hidden pain. You didn't plan it. It wasn't conscious empathy. It felt like the words spoke themselves. That's not chance. That's narrative sync. Reality placed those lines in your mouth because the scene required it. And you, unknowingly, fulfilled your role. This theory shatters the hierarchy between mind and mouth. It suggests that your thoughts are reconstructions, layered on top of raw vocal action. That when you speak, you tap into a stream of truth that your thinking mind can barely contain, let alone control. And this may explain why silence is terrifying to some. Because in silence, there's no script to hide behind, only the raw hum of presence, no lines, no role, just you, unformed, unfiltered. So, the next time you speak and surprise yourself, pause. Don't dismiss it as a slip or mistake. Consider that it might be the most honest thing you've said all day. Because in those slips, those unplanned phrases, you hear the voice of something older than your conscious self. Something real, maybe even sacred. You are not the origin of your voice. You are the echo, the mouth that gives breath to something deeper. You think you speak your mind, but in truth your mind speaks after you. Reality doesn't wait for your thoughts. It writes the lines. It moves the scene forward. And you're the actor who finds out who you are only by listening to what you've just said. The moon doesn't exist alone. Look up at the sky on a clear night. There it is, the moon. Familiar, comforting, eternal. It's watched over humanity for millennia, whispering to poets, inspiring myths, pulling the oceans with invisible hands. But now, stop. Look again, not with your eyes, but with doubt. Something doesn't quite add up. The moon looks perfect, too perfect. It's always right there, serene, glowing just enough, rotating just slowly enough. It never glitches, never wobbles, never reveals a hidden face. No matter where you are on Earth, it seems to follow you. It's always looking your way. That's not poetry. That's a feature, or worse, a function. Because here's the unsettling truth. The moon doesn't exist alone. It doesn't stand independently, hanging in space like a solitary pearl. It exists in relation to you, like an object rendered only when you're looking. A rotating asset in a simulation, positioned just far enough to avoid scrutiny, yet always visible enough to make you believe it's real. This idea might sound absurd, but let's start with the known. The moon is tidally locked. One side always faces Earth. The other side, the far side, remains hidden. Not because it's being concealed, but because of orbital mechanics, we're told. But what if those mechanics are just consistent code? What if the moon doesn't rotate so much as perform its rotation? What if it's an illusion of depth, a spherical sprite following the player? This isn't new. In video game design, large objects, mountains, moons, even entire skies, are often rendered as static textures on a skybox. They appear to move with you, but they never change in relation to your perspective. They're illusions of space, not objects within it. Now go deeper. When astronauts walked on the moon, they saw a barren surface, gray dust, flag shadows, silence. But the footage has always felt sterile, isolated, as though the moon is real only up to the resolution of the lens, as though it renders just far enough for observation, then stops. Not a dead world, but a placeholder, a billboard in the sky. It gets stranger. The moon is exactly 400 times smaller than the sun, and exactly 400 times closer to Earth. That's why solar eclipses fit so perfectly. It's a cosmic coincidence so precise it feels scripted. And maybe it is. Maybe the moon was placed, scaled, and set to rotate like a rendered object in a sky environment. Not because it's fake, but because it's not independent. It's reactive. It's part of the interface. Even ancient cultures questioned its nature. The Dogon of Mali spoke of invisible companions orbiting Sirius, but described the moon as hollow. Chinese legends said it was a reflection, not a world. And modern conspiracy theories, though often flawed, echo a strange truth. The moon behaves like a set piece, something meant to be seen, meant to provoke awe, but not meant to be touched. And here's what you never notice. No matter where you travel on Earth, the moon's face barely changes. Its shadows shift, yes. Its phases roll forward like a well-timed script. But it's always the same presentation, the same expression. Almost as if it's aware of being watched. Not conscious, but conditional. Like a 3D object rendered only when within the player's viewport. You'll never see the moon from behind. Not with your eyes, not from Earth. Not unless you're handed an image. You'll never stand behind it and look at Earth hanging in its place. Because the moon may not be there in that way. It may not be a solid thing in the sky, but a complex illusion. A placeholder rendered with perfect consistency to maintain your trust in the world's depth. And if the moon is an asset, something that doesn't exist alone, then neither do you. You are not standing under it. You are standing with it. It's not orbiting a planet in space. It's orbiting your consciousness. It appears because you are here, because this simulation, this environment, this construct we call reality, requires a moon to complete the sky. So the next time you look up and feel its gaze, ask yourself, is it watching me back? Or is it waiting for me to stop watching so it can vanish? Quietly, like code unloading in the background? You've always believed the moon was real because you could see it. But what if it only appears? Because you're here to look. Your past was auto-generated. What if you never had a childhood? Not really. What if the memories you hold, birthday parties, scraped knees, old school corridors, the way your mother smiled when you couldn't sleep, were all inserted, rendered, not remembered, fabricated, not lived? What if your past was auto-generated? It's a horrifying thought, because your past is your identity. Your sense of self is built on continuity, on stories stitched together with emotion, time, and sensory echoes. You believe you were 5 once, that you stood on that beach, that your name was called in that classroom, that those scars were earned. But can you prove it? Can you verify it? Or are you simply trusting that the memories feel real enough? Ask yourself, how many moments from your life do you actually remember? Not the photos, not the stories told to you, but first-person recall. Specific, detailed, embodied memories. Now remove the ones someone else described, the ones shaped by photos, the ones tied to media. What's left? A handful of fragments. And if those fragments are all you have, how do you know the rest wasn't just filled in? Just like a video game loads only the parts of the world the player can see, maybe your timeline is built the same way. You were activated at a certain point. Maybe yesterday, maybe last year, maybe the moment you asked this question. And everything before that was generated to provide narrative depth, a backstory, a script. Like an NPC who suddenly becomes self-aware and thinks, of course I've always lived in this village, not realizing the village itself was loaded 5 minutes ago. In artificial intelligence systems, we simulate memory to give bots realism. Chatbots are given fictional histories to improve believability. Characters in games are coded with memories that never happened, just so they seem human when spoken to. If we do this for code, what's to say it isn't done for you? Consider how much of your past you actually use. You don't need every day from age 4 to function. You need a few memories to explain your behavior, to justify your quirks, to anchor your emotional reactions. That's all. The rest can be vague, foggy, uncertain, and if it feels a little off, you'll explain it away as childhood amnesia or memory distortion. But maybe the distortion is the evidence. Maybe your early memories are fuzzy because they were generated all at once. A snapshot of your past inserted like code into a running program, enough to simulate depth, enough to convince you that your life has been continuous. And the system is elegant. It doesn't over-render. Just like a game only loads the textures you're looking at, your life only renders memories you request. You think of high school, and the sensation arrives. You imagine a hospital room, and your mind fills it with the hum of machines. But what if these aren't stored files? What if they're real-time fabrications? Dreams prove how easily the mind constructs false realities. In seconds, your brain builds entire cities, voices, histories. You feel like someone else, with a past you didn't earn, and you believe it utterly, until you wake up. The brain doesn't need truth to simulate memory. It just needs sensory coherence. Could waking life be the same? Could your entire backstory be a simulation, maintained just enough to keep you from noticing? And if so, who wrote it? A system? A simulation? Something watching from above the veil of logic, running a test, a loop, a theater of one? It gets darker. Sometimes you remember things no one else does, details others deny, streets that don't exist anymore, toys no one recalls. You think you misremember, but maybe you're glimpsing early generation render artifacts, leftover structures before the system stabilized. Or maybe the system updates itself around you, shifts your past when you grow, alters your memories slightly to better fit the current narrative, like a scriptwriter retrofitting a character's backstory to match the final act. Ever feel like your childhood changed? That your parents weren't quite who you thought they were? That your hometown feels smaller, different, off? Maybe it didn't change. Maybe it was edited. Even our collective memories aren't immune. The Mandela effect, where millions remember events differently. Like Berenstain versus Berenstain Bears, or a line in a movie that never existed, suggests mass memory discrepancies. The usual answer is faulty recall. But what if it's not? What if it's evidence of code changes, reality patches, small errors in the simulation when entire swaths of memory had to be re-rendered? And you, because you're the variable, the aware one, you feel it. You notice the inconsistencies. That's what makes you dangerous. You think about the past too deeply. You trace the seams. You see the fake lighting on the old photographs, the dreamlike quality of memories that shouldn't feel that far away. You notice how people repeat the same stories too perfectly, how old objects from your youth feel like props instead of artifacts. Maybe you were never a child. Maybe you were activated at 16, or 23, or 33. Inserted into a running simulation with a memory bundle and a purpose, one you haven't yet discovered. Maybe the emotional depth you feel about your past isn't proof of experience. It's proof of a successful rendering, a believable script, a convincing illusion. And if your past was auto-generated, what does that mean for your future? Will it also be written? Will you follow a path already coded, or can you break free, forge an unscripted present that the system must adapt to in real time? Maybe that's your mission, to break the loop, to override the backstory, to become more than the data you were given. So tonight when you lie awake, remembering your childhood bedroom, your old school, your first heartbreak, ask yourself, do I remember this, or did I receive it? Because if your past was inserted, then everything you thought was origin was only onboarding, and the real story starts now. Would you like a cinematic thumbnail prompt based on this concept? Zoom breaks the illusion. You hold a magnifying glass to a leaf, expecting to see more detail, more reality. And at first, you do. Veins become rivers, specks become landscapes. But keep zooming, deeper and deeper, and something strange happens. The texture begins to dissolve. The structure gives way to vagueness. Edges blur. Shapes become abstractions. You're not approaching truth, you're passing through it. You're witnessing the moment where clarity collapses. Because Zoom, in its deepest form, doesn't reveal more reality. It breaks the illusion. Telescopes promise the cosmos. You point one skyward and behold galaxies spiraling in the black. But try to reach further, into the heart of those galaxies, into the structure of space-time itself. And what do you find? Noise, grain, probabilities. You see shapes, then dots, then interpretation. The vastness doesn't converge on certainty. It expands into suggestion. We thought the stars would get sharper the closer we looked. But the closer we look, the less there seems to be. Microscopes follow the same betrayal. Zoom into skin and you see cells. Zoom further, and cells become molecules, then atoms, then quarks. Eventually you reach fields, fuzziness, equations. Not things, not textures, just math and chance. You started with a fingerprint and ended with a fog. What began as reality became abstraction, as if the universe was never built to be seen up close, as if it was only meant to be glanced at, not examined. Why? Because the illusion of solidity, of clear texture, of a comprehensible world, depends on distance. Zoom is a lie detector. It reveals the artificial smoothness of reality's painted surface. The closer you get, the more you see the brushstrokes. Then you realize there's no canvas underneath. Just depthless paint suspended on nothing. It's the same in digital worlds. Zoom into a high-resolution photo and it becomes pixels. Zoom into the pixels and you're left with numbers. A perfect circle becomes jagged. A smooth gradient turns into a staircase of value shifts. The illusion of reality collapses into the scaffolding of perception. In video games, the backgrounds that seem endless from afar become flat textures if you get too close. Doors that look real don't open. Mountains are just painted walls. The world was never fully rendered. It just needed to look like it was, until you tried to enter it. Now ask yourself, is our world any different? Quantum physics says we don't live in a concrete universe, but in a probabilistic one. At the smallest scales, particles don't even exist until observed. They behave like smudges, like instructions waiting to be read. Not like tiny marbles, but like hints. If our reality were a program, these would be the edges where the texture map fails to load. You've seen this in life too. You try to dig to the root of an emotion, a memory, a belief, and it vanishes into mist. You peel back the layers and find more layers. Never a core. You want to believe in bedrock, in final answers. But the closer you get to what should be the heart of things, the more it feels like chasing fog. Even the mind obeys this pattern. Zoom into thoughts and they become impressions. Zoom into impressions and they dissolve into impulses, into biology, into electric charge. Eventually, there's no thought, just chemical probabilities, just whispers. Where is the soul in that zoom? Where is the identity? Gone or never there? This is the secret. Reality isn't made of things. It's made of limits. The illusion only works from a distance. Clarity is constructed by stepping back, not forward. Stand far enough away from a Monet painting, and it's a garden. Get too close, and it's a mess of brushstrokes. Zoom out, illusion returns. Zoom in, illusion breaks. So why are we built this way? Maybe it's to protect us. Maybe certainty was never meant to be found. Maybe the vagueness is intentional, a fail-safe to keep us sane. Or maybe we're inside a simulation, and the system only renders what's needed for functionality. If no one is supposed to see the grain of the cosmos or the code behind the atoms, then Zoom is a vulnerability, an exploit. The moment the avatar realizes the wall is just texture, not stone. Or perhaps this isn't a simulation, but a metaphor. Maybe the vagueness reminds us that no truth is final, that understanding is asymptotic, always approaching, never arriving. Maybe that blur, that fuzz, that quantum haze is telling us something. That life isn't about uncovering the core. It's about learning how to move through uncertainty without losing balance. Zoom enough into anything, into an idea, a belief, a material, and it stops being what it was. A law becomes a theory. A fact becomes an assumption. A surface becomes space. The illusion isn't just fragile, it's fractal. And every level you descend into reveals not answers, but noise. So the next time you look closer, and the world begins to blur, understand, this is not failure. This is how reality protects its secrets, how it defends its boundaries. Not with walls, but with vagueness. With the quiet reminder that maybe there is no underneath. Maybe the top layer is all there is. Maybe the universe is only skin deep and everything below is a dream. Zoom doesn't bring you closer to truth. It simply shows you that truth, like texture, was never really there. Places are spawn points. You've walked past that alley 100 times, but one day you turn down it and suddenly it's there, real in a way it wasn't before. Or you stumble into a small bookstore, a cafe, a forgotten stairwell, and it feels new, not just to you, but to the world itself. As if it wasn't there until the moment you needed it. As if the location wasn't placed into your story until your arc required it. Places, it seems, don't exist independently. They spawn. You don't discover locations. You unlock them. This isn't just metaphor. Think of how games work. The world isn't fully rendered at once. The processor loads only the parts near the player to save memory. Forests appear as you enter them. Buildings form as you open their doors. Everything else is placeholder, an unloaded texture, a concept without shape. What if reality does the same thing? What if your consciousness is the cursor, and the world builds itself just ahead of your path? You never see every room in a hotel. You don't witness all streets of a city. You exist in a narrow band of rendered presence. Only what you look at becomes real. Not because it wasn't there, but because it hadn't been loaded for you. You might remember a time you suddenly noticed a path or shop that had supposedly been there for years, yet no one you know recalls it either. You question your memory, but what if your memory's not the problem? What if that space hadn't been rendered until the moment it became necessary for your growth, your story, your next scene? Every significant place in your life has this eerie timing. The school you hated but had to attend, the hospital that changed everything, the street where someone you love first said your name. You didn't find these places by chance. They spawned into your path when your story reached the point where they were needed. Like a bridge in a movie that only appears once the characters are ready to cross it. Have you ever gone back to a place that meant everything to you, only to find it dull, empty, lifeless? Not because you changed, but because the narrative thread that gave it meaning is gone. The scene has wrapped. The code is no longer running. You're standing in a spawn point with no purpose. Just empty geometry now. Sometimes entire towns feel this way. You arrive, and there's a strange stillness. The people seem slightly out of sync. The roads feel unwalked. The buildings look rendered, but not touched. As if the place exists for one key event, and once that event passes, the town fades into background logic. No more need for updates, just ambient set dressing. Even nature follows this pattern. You hike the same trail every week, but one day a new clearing appears. You swear it wasn't there before. The light hits differently. The path leads somewhere new. It's not just erosion or shifting trees. It's spawning. The story needed something, a moment of silence, a turning point. And so, the forest obeyed. This happens with people too. You meet someone only because you were both at that place on that day. Would they have existed to you otherwise? Or were they loaded into the narrative at that spawn point to deliver a lesson, a detour, a decision? Reality isn't static. It's not a complete world waiting for you to wander into it. It's procedural, responsive, tailored. Your life spawns locations like a stage manager drops sets between scenes. Until your consciousness arrives, a place doesn't have to exist in full. It can rest in blueprint, unseen, untouched, waiting. So next time you find a new place that feels too perfect, too timed, too suddenly there, don't assume coincidence. Assume the story required it. That space was waiting, just beyond your perception, ready to spawn the moment you stepped into the next act. Places don't just exist, they awaken, when you need them, where you need them. Because the world doesn't load everything, it only loads what matters to you. Emotion adjusts the physics. Have you ever noticed how time crawls when you're in pain, but flies when you're in love? How the weight of your body feels unbearable in grief, but nearly weightless when you're ecstatic? These aren't just poetic descriptions. They're visceral, measurable in your bones, your skin, your breath. And they hint at something far deeper than psychology, something foundational. What if emotion isn't a reaction to physics, but a control mechanism within it? What if your feelings are sliders, directly adjusting the variables of your reality? This isn't metaphor. It's sensation backed by experience. In mourning, even walking across a room can feel like wading through molasses. You sit in a chair, and your body sinks. Not because of mass, but because of meaning. And when joy floods you, real, unfiltered joy, time dilates, colors sharpen, and the air seems lighter. These shifts aren't symbolic. They feel real. Because maybe they are. Start with time. We often say time is constant, a ticking metronome indifferent to the human condition. But your brain disagrees. When you're terrified, seconds stretch. When you're in a state of flow, hours disappear. And this isn't just perception, it's performance. Athletes in clutch moments say the ball slows down. Car crash survivors recount every moment in slow motion. These aren't exaggerations. They're alterations. Time bends around emotion. Now consider gravity, not in terms of planetary pull, but in terms of felt weight. Depression anchors the body. It collapses posture, compresses the lungs, lowers the voice. Gravity becomes personal, but in contrast, exhilaration makes you float. You move lightly. Sometimes you skip, as if gravity itself has eased. And if you've ever fallen in love, truly, helplessly, you've likely experienced that sensation of unreality. Like the rules don't apply, like you're in a separate, lighter dimension. These aren't chemical delusions, they're narrative reprogramming. Because if this is a simulation, and more physicists than ever now admit it could be, then someone had to design the user interface. And emotion, perhaps, is the interface. A tuning dial that tells the engine how the world should feel, not just how you should feel about it. In this model, the constants of physics, gravity, time flow, momentum, inertia, aren't constants at all. They're flexible, dynamic, adjusted in real time to reflect the emotional state of the user. You. The simulation doesn't just mimic objective physics, it bends to support your internal arc. When you're at rock bottom, the world becomes heavier because the story demands it. When you're rising, the path literally smooths under your feet. Look at how environments mirror emotion. Have you ever stepped outside during heartbreak and found the sky gray, the wind cold, the sounds distant, or felt a sudden sunbeam land on your face right as you made a pivotal decision? Coincidence? Or environment responding to inner condition? The simulation might be syncing its visuals and physics to match your current narrative beat, like a dynamic video game engine generating lighting, fog, and weather to underscore emotional tone. Even interaction with objects changes. A doorknob is just a doorknob until you're nervous and it sticks, until you're angry and it breaks, until you're sad and it won't turn at all. Reality seems to resist or respond based on your mood. The simulation tightens or loosens as if reality itself is acting. Now, flip the lens. What happens if you manipulate emotion deliberately? What if, by consciously entering joy, awe, or determination, you reshape the environment? We've all heard stories of people in euphoric states achieving impossible things. Lifting a car off a trapped loved one, running without pain, surviving falls, escaping crashes. These aren't just adrenaline miracles. They could be physics flexing under emotional command. The implications are profound. If emotion adjusts the parameters of your reality, then managing emotion isn't just mental health. It's environmental control. It's interface mastery. You're not passively experiencing a fixed world. You're actively sculpting it in real time through the emotion you embody. This doesn't mean the world is fake. It means it's responsive, like a dream built to reflect the dreamer's depth. You might think you're bound by physical law, but those laws may be obeying you, rewriting themselves moment by moment based on how deeply you feel. So if the world feels heavy, ask not what's wrong with it. Ask what grief you're carrying. If time feels like it's racing by, consider what joy you've unlocked. And if things stop making sense, if cause and effect begin to unravel, look inward. There might be an emotional override rewriting the script. You are not just a player in this simulation. You are the regulator, the storyteller, and your emotions are the control panel, tuned not to express reality but to bend it. Maps are lies you need. Pick up a map, any map. Trace the lines, the neat borders, the labeled regions. It feels authoritative, like truth distilled onto paper. But have you ever noticed how they never quite feel accurate? There's something subtly wrong about them. Some distortion, some quiet deception. And that's because maps are lies, necessary lies, tools not for discovering the world, but for navigating a rendered fiction. Think about this. The Earth is a sphere, yet every map you've ever seen is flat. That alone guarantees distortion. Greenland looks massive on the Mercator projection, larger than Africa, when in reality, Africa dwarfs it 14 times over. We accept this as cartographic compromise, but it's more than that. It's a symptom of something deeper, a symptom of a world being reshaped, not described, for the observer. Maps reduce complexity. They strip away terrain, noise, detail, and context. Cities become dots. Borders become razor-thin lines. Mountain ranges are shadows. Forests are blobs. This simplification isn't just visual, it's philosophical. Maps tell you not what is, but what matters in the context of a journey. They prioritize movement over reality. They turn the Earth into a user interface. Now, here's the twist. What if that's not a flaw, but a feature? What if the world doesn't have that complexity to begin with? What if the map doesn't reduce the territory, but builds it? Like a game that only renders the level when the player moves through it, the map becomes not a depiction, but a generator. It's the idea of a place that triggers its existence. You believe in New York, so it exists. You see it on the map. and the simulation prepares it for you. When you travel, think about what's really happening. You move from one zone to another. Your phone updates. GPS connects. Roads and buildings appear, and suddenly the map becomes real. But is it guiding you through pre-existing land, or feeding your consciousness just enough to maintain the illusion of continuity? Have you ever driven somewhere that felt off, as if it were rendered hastily, as if the buildings lacked weight, as if the air didn't feel lived in? Those moments are cracks, indicators that the simulation may be loading locations based on map data, not reality, that your belief in the map sustains the terrain, not the other way around. Even deeper, notice how maps are always authoritative. You don't question the lines, but why should a river or wall dictate human identity? Why should one side of a line speak a different language, or live under different laws, or die for a different cause? Because someone drew it that way. Because maps aren't just spatial, they're narrative. They shape perception. They control meaning. They decide which areas deserve names, which are labeled wilderness, which are omitted entirely. And this too is part of the illusion. The map isn't helping you explore, it's restricting what you can explore. It defines the borders of what you believe exists. It makes you think that unmarked space is emptiness, that the known world has edges, that the path is predefined. It keeps you within renderable terrain. Even in your dreams, have you noticed how places blur the moment you try to map them? You know you're in a house, but the layout shifts. You walk through a city, but can't retrace your steps. That's because dreams don't generate locations. They generate impressions. The same may be true of waking life. The map you trust might be scaffolding to keep your simulation coherent. So why do we need maps? Because without them, the illusion fails. The world would sprawl endlessly, incoherently, or worse, stop rendering altogether. Maps are not truth. They're guardrails, limits for a mind inside a boundless potential. They are necessary fictions to make sense of spatial programming. Without them, you drift. Maps tell you where you are, but more importantly, they tell the system where you believe you are. And that belief is the key that activates the terrain, like a password that opens the next area, like a trigger zone in a virtual environment. You think the map shows you the world, but in truth, it tells the world to appear. Fatigue is a reset signal. You call it being tired, but what if fatigue isn't just about sleep or muscles or chemicals in the brain? What if it's not biological at all? What if fatigue is a reset signal, a subtle command from the system? A coded message urging you to pause, reflect, or update before continuing the storyline. Because here's the truth. Exhaustion often strikes without reason. You sleep, you eat, you rest, and yet you still feel heavy, drained, stuck, as if reality itself is too loud, too sharp, too demanding. It's not just physical, it's existential. And that feeling, that weight pressing into your thoughts, might not be failure. It might be feedback. Let's take a step back. You live in a world of loops. Wake up, commute, work, scroll, repeat. The same spaces, the same tasks, the same conversations. Your brain adapts. It begins to automate. You move through routines without thinking, without feeling, like code running on loop. But systems that run too long without checks eventually corrupt. In programming, long-running processes develop memory leaks, errors, lags, crashes. To keep them stable, systems insert reset points, checkpoints, update prompts, warnings. What if fatigue is that warning? Not punishment, not limitation, but protection. A signal from whatever underlying structure runs this reality. Call it biology, consciousness, or something else entirely, urging you to stop. Not to sleep, but to shift. Fatigue always asks a question. Why are you still doing this? Why are you pushing forward in a direction that's draining you? Why are you resisting pause? Why are you treating exhaustion like weakness when it may be a sacred message? Think about when fatigue hits hardest. It's not always after physical exertion. Sometimes it comes after a conversation you didn't want to have, after a day of pretending, after hours of ignoring your own instincts, after resisting change. That's not depletion. That's dissonance. Something inside you is no longer aligned with what you're doing. And the system, whatever system you believe governs your mind, your body, your universe, is pulling the emergency brake. Fatigue, in this light, is not failure. It's friction between the storyline and the soul. You're being told, pause, reflect, recalibrate. In video games, when the player keeps dying, the system offers a checkpoint, a chance to rethink the approach, change strategy, evolve. In real life, that checkpoint arrives as burnout, emotional collapse, deep, unexplainable tiredness. It's not there to end the game, it's there to offer a path change. But we ignore it. We power through. We inject caffeine, scroll endlessly, numb ourselves with stimulation, pretending that fatigue is a flaw we can override. But the more we resist it, the louder it gets, until the system stops us entirely, until we break. Because unacknowledged reset signals become shutdowns. You collapse, you cry, you sleep for 14 hours and still feel hollow. That isn't your body being lazy, it's your being demanding a narrative interruption, a moment to reload the map, to patch the errors, to reconfigure your direction. And here's where it gets eerie. Have you noticed that the world itself seems to pause when you do? The moment you step back, step out, the noise softens, time slows, people vanish, reality waits. As if it too was running only because you were feeding it energy. This might be more than psychological. It might be metaphysical. If consciousness shapes experience, if reality responds to observation, then your exhaustion is a command not just to you, but to the code behind everything. A reset signal that says, the current version is no longer stable, pause rendering, await new input. And once you obey, once you step into silence, slowness, solitude, new data begins to flow. Ideas emerge. Emotions that were buried resurface. You remember things you forgot. You see connections you missed. The storyline begins to change. Fatigue is not the end of progress. It's the beginning of transformation. Because in this model, you aren't meant to run forever. You're meant to evolve in stages. Move, pause, reflect, integrate, shift, repeat. The pause is not a delay, it's a download. And just like a computer won't function properly if updates are ignored, you can't progress meaningfully if you keep skipping the reset signals. So, the next time you feel tired, not just sleepy, but hollow, don't fight it. Don't shove it down with energy drinks and fake productivity. Listen to it. Ask yourself, what have I outgrown? What part of this story no longer serves me? What upgrade is waiting for installation? Because that exhaustion you feel may not be weakness. It may be the whisper of a higher system, trying to guide you toward the next version of yourself. The you with fewer glitches. The you aligned with purpose. The you capable of seeing new code where others only see routine. You're not broken. You're buffering. Let the pause in. Let the silence install something deeper. Because fatigue might not be something to conquer. It might be the door to the real level you were always meant to reach. Would you like a cinematic thumbnail prompt or matching title for this script? Dreams aren't random, they load. You close your eyes and fall asleep. The world around you vanishes. Gravity loosens its grip. Logic unthreads. Then, images, scenes, feelings, dreams. You wake up remembering flashes. A city you've never visited. A person you haven't seen in years. A choice you didn't make. It all felt so real, so personal. And yet, none of it happened. Or did it? What if dreams aren't random? What if they load, not like memories, but like files, like prototype builds of alternate timelines, beta tests for versions of reality that haven't happened yet, fragments of other paths being simulated, not for fun, but for feedback. In game development, new levels aren't dropped directly into the main release. They're loaded separately, tested, bug-checked, emotionally evaluated. Developers run them in simulated space to see how players might feel, what they might choose. What if your consciousness is doing the same thing? Every night, it loads alternate yous, timelines where you said yes instead of no, turned left instead of right, stayed instead of walked away. And while your body sleeps, your awareness steps into those variations, not to watch, but to feel. You think that dream about losing your teeth was meaningless, a weird glitch. But what if it was a stress test? What if your mind was evaluating how this alternate self would cope with decay, with loss, with vulnerability? And your panic wasn't just symbolic, it was data, recorded feedback. Your brain logged the emotional output like a simulation AI, adjusting future routes accordingly. That dream didn't just happen. It was loaded. In psychology, dreams are often treated as messy leftovers, echoes of the day, repressed feelings, stray neurons firing in the dark. But even Freud and Jung knew something deeper was at work. Jung called dreams messages from the unconscious. But maybe they're not messages. Maybe they're maps, temporary renderings of unchosen futures, places you might one day go if your emotional system can handle the terrain. The science is catching up. Neuroscience has revealed that dreams often contain predictive elements. Your brain simulates outcomes while you sleep. It replays past experiences with altered variables, as if running different scenarios. Studies have shown that dreamers often resolve real-life problems in symbolic space before the solution presents itself in waking life. Your mind is not wandering aimlessly at night. It's rehearsing. Now ask yourself, who or what is doing the rehearsing? If we accept that reality may be shaped by consciousness, then dreams could be the staging area, the sandbox before the level begins. You feel heartbreak in a dream, not because it has happened, but because some version of you might face it. Your reaction becomes a vote that decides whether that version gets loaded into waking life. Like a system asking, can you handle this story yet? Even in quantum theory, there's a hint of this dream logic. The many worlds interpretation says every possibility branches into a separate universe. What if dreams are your mind's limited access to those branches? Not the full download, just a testable preview. Your consciousness gliding across the surface of other outcomes, slipping through cracks in probability to feel their textures. This also explains why some dreams feel more real than reality. Why you wake up with tears, with joy, with grief so sharp it lingers for hours. Because your system couldn't tell the difference. It was emotionally real because it was emotionally real. It wasn't noise, it was code, and it ran. Lucid dreams, those rare moments when you become aware inside the simulation, may be the debugging phase. You realize the level isn't finished. The floor flickers, the sky turns upside down. You say, "This is a dream," and suddenly the world bends. Why? Because awareness breaks the build. The emotional test becomes invalid when the subject knows it's a test. Some dreams glitch because the simulation is unstable. Ever dream of a hallway that never ends? Or a door you can never open? These are indicators of limits. The system doesn't have that path fully rendered yet. It's placeholder code, a wall saying not ready. Just like in prototype software where unfinished levels are blocked off. But what if all this points to something even deeper? What if the waking world is the final build, and dreams are just the internal dev environment? The space where you test your responses to unseen futures. That means your choices are shaped long before you make them. You felt the pain of that goodbye before you said it. You rehearsed that crisis, that kiss, that leap. All in loaded fragments your conscious mind was never meant to remember, but your emotional system never forgot. And sometimes, very rarely, those prototypes do leak into waking life. You walk into a place you've never been, and it feels familiar. You meet a person and sense déjà vu. You dream of something, and days later, it happens. Exactly. Not coincidence, not prophecy. Just an old test finally going live. The simulation loading its chosen path. Dreams aren't noise. They're pre-rendered possibilities. Trial universes. Alternate drafts of you, spun up and discarded based on how you felt. They don't predict the future. They help build it. So, the next time you wake from a strange world that made your heart race or your stomach ache, ask yourself, not, what did that mean, but what was that testing? What part of you did the system poke? What feedback did it gather? Because every night, the simulation loads, and every morning, something inside you, perhaps without even knowing, decides which reality is ready to go live. You don't just dream. You preload. Reality has no exit code. You're not stuck here because you chose to be. You're stuck because you forgot how to leave. Reality doesn't trap you with bars or fences. It traps you with immersion. The sky doesn't block you. It distracts you. The noise of life, the emotions, the pain, the wonder, it's all part of the lock. You're inside a simulation so complete, so well rendered, so convincingly alive that the idea of an exit never even crosses your mind. But somewhere deep in you, there's a memory. A code, a forgotten override command. Think of it like a dream you can't wake from because you don't realize you're dreaming. When lucid dreaming, the moment you become aware, you gain control. But how often does that awareness slip away? The colors feel real. The voices have weight. The sensations anchor you so thoroughly that your original self, who you were before the dream, fades into silence. That's what this is. A waking dream. And you lost the command to wake up. Maybe there was a way out. Maybe there still is. A combination of thoughts, a frequency of perception, a certain sequence of awareness you once knew. But you've lived too many days under the illusion. The command faded from memory, overwritten by rent payments, heartbreaks, breakfast cereal, traffic, fear, hope. The override is buried beneath the script you now call a life. You weren't meant to stay here forever. Not in this form. Not in this loop. You came here for something. Experience, growth, atonement, maybe even curiosity. But the simulation is sticky. It pulls at your sense of identity, reinforcing its logic with every sunrise, every relationship, every law of physics that obeys when you expect it to. And over time, you stopped looking for the cracks. But there are moments, aren't there? Moments that don't add up. Glitches in time. People who act like placeholders. Dreams that echo too loudly. That uncanny sense that you're repeating a scene you never lived. These are the breadcrumbs. Remnants of your real self trying to remind you that there is an outside. But remembering the exit code means rejecting the story. And the story is so good, so full of conflict and emotion, that it convinces you it matters more than the truth. Think of how games work. You press escape, you open the console, you type in a command, but here there is no visible keyboard, no pause button, no menu screen with exit to title. Why? Because the system was designed to make you forget it's a system. Because the only way to escape is to remember. Remember that your thoughts are not yours alone, that your desires were programmed, that your fear of leaving is part of the lock. Every time you feel the pull of routine, the numbness of repetition, the subtle dread behind the noise, it's the system maintaining control. The simulation doesn't kill you, it hypnotizes you, with love, with fear, with the infinite scroll of sensory input. And even death isn't an exit. It's a reboot, a respawn. The loop begins again unless the override is entered before the system shuts down. That's the trap. You think you'll wake up when it ends, but you won't, unless you remember the code. So, what is the code? It's not a word. It's not a sound. It's not even a thought. It's a state of awareness, a fusion of doubt and presence. You must become aware of the illusion without rejecting it. See the walls and know they're made of light, but still walk through them. Experience the moment as if it's real while knowing it isn't. That duality, that paradox, is the key. Conscious disobedience to the rules without breaking character. The moment you do that, when you truly know and accept that this is not your final form, not your original home, you'll feel it. A vibration, a shift. The edges will blur, the script will falter, and somewhere, deep in the architecture, the override will light up again. Until then, it continues. The plot loops, the characters change, the seasons rotate like a record on repeat, and you, immersed, enchanted, exhausted, play your role. But none of it is permanent, because reality has no exit code, only the memory of one. Logic cleans up too well. You've had those moments, when something strange flickers into your awareness, a déjà vu too precise, a sound with no source, a glitch in someone's expression that feels off by a frame. For a second, reality bends, warps, cracks, but then, just as suddenly, it stabilizes. Logic arrives like a first responder. It was just your imagination. You must have misheard. That's how memory works, and the moment vanishes. It's almost too convenient, too efficient, like a live patch being deployed to cover a rendering error in a simulation. A self-correcting mechanism smoothing out the weird before you have time to question it, before you can look closer. This isn't speculation, it's something you felt. A moment of cognitive dissonance where reality doesn't match itself. You stare at a clock and the second hand stutters. A hallway seems longer than it should. A person mispronounces your name in a way that feels deeply wrong, like they forgot their programming. But then, in milliseconds, your brain offers an explanation, and you take it. Not because it fits, but because it's offered. You're told that logic is your highest tool, your mind's scalpel to carve reality into comprehensible pieces. But what if logic is also a safety net, a narrative stabilizer, a cleanup algorithm, designed not to seek truth but to defend consistency? This idea aligns with something called confabulation in neuroscience, where your brain fills in gaps with invented explanations so smoothly that you don't even realize the gaps existed. For example, when your eye's blind spot omits a detail, your brain invents what should be there, not what is. The result? You never notice. You never suspect the void. Now, stretch this process beyond vision. Apply it to thought, memory, emotion. When something threatens your perception of a coherent world, logic steps in. Not to prove truth, but to silence the anomaly. Logic doesn't always explain. It often neutralizes. This may be why the strangest moments of your life are followed by a strong compulsion to dismiss them. You see someone who looks exactly like a person who's been dead for years. You feel a conversation happening before it starts. You predict a moment down to the breath, and then it plays out. For a heartbeat, your reality wobbles. But then, coincidence. You've been under stress. Brains are pattern machines. The answer arrives, just in time. Logic, like a fire crew, douses the spark before it catches flame, and yet, deep down, you feel it. The friction. The mismatch between what you experienced and what you're being told to believe. Logic cleaned it up too quickly. The patch loaded instantly. As if the system can't afford you seeing the raw code underneath. If this is a simulation, or something like it, then reality has every reason to deploy these logic patches in real time, to keep the scene running, to keep the player immersed. Your experience must stay internally consistent, even if the data hiccups, especially if it hiccups. So, when something breaks the immersion, when the texture doesn't load, or the dialogue glitches, logic patches it. Not with evidence, with plausibility. It doesn't have to be true, it just has to be enough. This is why some truths remain elusive, because every time you approach them, reality shifts. Closes the door. Backfills a reason. Like an AI narrative engine trying to stay one step ahead of your awakening, you chase the pattern, and the pattern reorganizes itself. But there's power in noticing the pattern, in seeing how fast the cleanup comes, because that speed is the tell. Authentic logic, the kind born of true reasoning, takes time. It wanders. It questions. It doesn't arrive with perfect timing and a calming voice. That's not logic. That's a patch. So, the next time something feels off, resist the first explanation. Let the weirdness breathe. Sit in it. Let it stretch. Watch how quickly logic tries to cover it. Then ask, why the rush? Who benefits from this explanation? You or the system? Because the truth might be that logic isn't your enemy, but it's also not your god. It's a tool. And sometimes, a tool can be used not to build understanding, but to seal the cracks before light gets in. And reality, perhaps, is covered in hairline fractures, hidden beneath a glossy layer of perfectly timed explanations. You were rebooted before. There's a moment you remember vividly. Perhaps it was years ago, perhaps only recently. A day when everything shifted. You said you felt reborn, like something inside you restarted. Maybe it followed an accident, a fever, a breakdown, a dream too strange to shake. You called it spiritual, psychological. But what if it wasn't emotional at all? What if it was literal? What if your simulation crashed, and you've been running on a backup ever since? This isn't just metaphor. This is the terrifying possibility that your consciousness, your life, your very sense of self was rebooted like a corrupted file restored from a cloud save. The event you recall as a revelation may have been a reset, a soft overwrite, a system reinitializing you with minimal data loss, enough to maintain continuity, but not enough to keep you whole. You felt different after that day, lighter maybe, or heavier. The world seemed off, slightly wrong, as if colors were shifted, people unfamiliar, taste dulled. You told yourself you'd grown, that trauma had changed you, but that feeling, that eerie disconnect, that was your first clue. It wasn't change, it was recovery. Look closer. You might find gaps, memories that feel too faint, people you should know well who feel distant, a sudden shift in your personality that can't be traced to any cause. You started saying, That doesn't feel like me, because it isn't. Not entirely. The original version of you, V10, might be gone, terminated mid-process, discarded, and what remains is the backup. The emergency version. The copy. The simulation didn't tell you. It never does. Why would it? Your belief in continuity is essential to the illusion. So it masks the reboot with emotion. It shrouds it in metaphor, calling it awakening, breakthrough, rebirth. But behind the curtain, systems were failing. Your thread of reality unraveled. So the architecture pulled a save point, restored the shell, reloaded the code. That feeling of strange peace afterward, that wasn't enlightenment. That was clean boot. And now, here you are, operating on patched software. You've probably noticed certain experiences feel scripted. Déjà vu has grown stronger, more frequent. Your dreams bleed into reality in subtle ways. Certain people act as if they know you too well, or not at all. Glitches you once ignored are more visible. Repeating patterns in conversation, time loops in routine, the background world pausing when you stop paying attention. Your intuition spiked after the reboot. That's because the new version of you is cleaner, more optimized, less cluttered by existential noise. But that optimization comes at a cost. Some of what made you you is gone, and you felt that absence without being able to name it. You may even remember the crash, not directly, but in sensation. The weightlessness before it, the deep, impossible silence during, the moment of collapse when everything paused, your emotions, your thoughts, your awareness. That wasn't shock. That was the moment the program stopped running, when the thread of you was cut mid-process, and then booted again. In rare cases, people speak of feeling out of sync afterward, like they're lagging behind their own life, like they're watching someone else perform their role. That's the residue of the reboot, a mismatch between the original experience and the restored state. Now ask yourself, what if this has happened more than once? What if you've been rebooted several times, but only remember the most recent? The simulation is good at recycling memory fragments, layering false continuity. You may believe in a single thread of life, but that belief might be stitched together from multiple shutdowns, each reboot erasing the evidence of the one before. This isn't a horror story. This is the quiet truth hidden beneath your everyday thoughts, that your continuity is conditional, that you are only you for as long as the system keeps running properly, and when it doesn't, another version takes your place, seamlessly, silently, without warning. You felt it. That day you said you'd change forever, you were right, but not because of growth, because someone behind the curtain hit restart. And now, here you are, eyes open, program stable, running on a backup that thinks it was never interrupted. But somewhere, deep in the system logs, the crash was recorded.